Hello and welcome to the King Heroes Journey podcast. My name is Beth Martins. It's July 27, 2026. We're still here. Here we are. And today I'm super excited to talk with Banjo Glass. He might be navigating some tech issues of some kind. So we'll just chat for a minute. And if you're there listening, come and say hello in the chat. I do have a couple of announcements. So this week coming up in the Breath of Fresh Air, I am going to be talking with Miss Marissa Love again. Now this time it's going to be a little bit of a twist around, and she's going to be interviewing me. She referred to herself, I think she doesn't mind, as wanting. She doesn't have her own podcast, but she wants to be now bear with me on this, but a podcast tour where she goes and interviews the interviewers who often don't get interviewed. So that's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to that coming up this Friday. And August 6th coming up, I have an open house for my Journey Code coaching training coming up. And we're going to be diving in with the architecture of human behavior. That's my favorite, very related to today's podcast, where we're talking about culture and culture creation and how that happens with Mr. Banjo Glass. So if you'd like to join me for the open house, it's going to be really awesome. You're going to learn about the Journey Code coaching training, and you're going to learn about why saying no and having a boundary about saying no is only that first step that you likely already know if you've learned to do that. All right. So there's a link in the chat. And I think without further ado, Matt or Banjo, do you want to give me a thumbs up whenever you're ready? But no rush. I see you're still getting some things together. So it's been an interesting weekend. I went out and spent some time in the country, and it was extremely blissful and beautiful and kind of bug-free for a few moments. And I had this idea, I'm going to go for a walk. It was like a romantic walk on the road. And I got bit by probably, not that many mosquitoes, but they bit me 100 times. And oh my God, that's really ruined the last 48 hours of my life because I'm totally on fire over here. But that's what happens in Manitoba. So that's that. We did a great podcast on Friday with Dagmar Stansova on nickel detoxing and the PEA, palmitoyl ethanolamide, that has been a good boon for people these days. So go back and watch that if you would like to. All right. So we're talking the creation of culture today, which is, to me, the most fascinating thing of all, because most of our culture is engineered, and it doesn't come up to us because there's souls like who I refer to as Banjo Glass or Matt in the background, just making shit happen, right? This is what we need to do. We need to become doers, and realize that without the power of spirit and the inspiration, that's not going to happen. So are you ready, Banjo? Keep calling you Banjo. I think he is. Maybe still working on something. Can you hear me, by the way? Okay, let's just give it a try and see how it goes. All right, I'm bringing you on.
You hear me? Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you. Unfortunately, I can't hear you when you're backstage, so I don't have that, but you should have audio. So yeah, you can hear me good?
Okay. Hey, Beth, I can hear you good. How's it sounding on my end?
Just perfect. Yeah, and really good. Yeah. So you're there in your studio.
Yeah, today I'm in the place where it all happens, and my phone's actually where my torch is usually sitting. So, this is a comfortable place where I spend a lot of time.
You're right at home.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. We might have a little bit of a delay, but that's okay. We can work around it. And so last time in part one, which I really do highly recommend watching, we talked about, let's see if I can grab a link really quickly that I will share in the chat, to the first episode, which is very worthwhile. It turned out to be all the background that we needed to have this conversation today. we had a lot more in common than I expected, maybe than you expected. Some really deep concepts. I honestly had no idea how deep that was going to go, and it was deep as all anything.
Yeah, that was a deep start.
It was a very deep start. Yeah, very extended. And I knew I could have talked to you for like a week. So we're here for back for part two. And, this is a purely what I want to call a kind of selfish interest, because I was, for 5 minutes, would I even have called myself a deadhead? I don't know, but I certainly was good friends with people that did. And they got me to go, I was going to say, drag me to some concerts. I think I was at 5 Grateful Dead concerts. So I had a little window into it, not a big one. And it wasn't my main passion, but being good friends with these people, I fed vicariously off of their passion. And so do you want to start by going back in your history and how that all began, and how did you get interested in that community?
Yeah, for me, I was actually just a little too late to catch the original iteration. I found out about the Grateful Dead and all that stuff around 1994, 95. So I had friends also who were extremely into it. And I was still in high school at the time in a Midwest town in southern Michigan. And so I kind of had been, the Dead was it was kind of a mystery because it wasn't something you saw on MTV all the time. They didn't have a lot of, radio hits by the early 90s. There wasn't a lot of awareness there, at least where I was growing up. But when I found out about that scene, like just about the time I would have got to go see a concert, Jerry died. So that first version was done. But not long after, actually, I dropped out of college and went out west to go traveling and following rainbow gatherings, which are kind of like basically the same kind of vibe as a real 60s sort of back to the land, sort of almost anarchistic kind of, vibe. And most of the rainbow gathering population in the mid 90s was comprised of a bunch of old deadheads that didn't have anywhere to go after the Grateful Dead started touring. So it was through that window of hanging out at these rainbow gatherings, which are kind of like a big Grateful Dead parking lot in the middle of a forest. But the same characters, like almost everybody there who were sort of the elders of that group were just longtime Deadheads, or at least kind of keepers of that whole 60s psychedelic, back to the land, kind of traveling Kerouac lifestyle, flame. So that was my introduction to the Grateful Dead. It was through traveling with that group. And then when I settled down in Eugene, Oregon, after a couple years of traveling with all this kind of wild, on the road, Grateful Dead-ish inspired rainbow gathering thing, when I landed around Eugene, Oregon, it turned out that a lot of the sort of family and people who had been really deeply involved, a large portion of them sort of settled around there from that original Deadhead scene. And then, of course, also the other ones, and Bob Weir and Rat Dog and Phil and Friends and further festivals, all this sort of, the little things that kept going after the Grateful Dead ended its original run. All of those little side streams also, I was right there to sort of jump into those types of streams too, which glass art, functional glass art was sort of one of those little carriers.
Oh, we had a little blip in the connection here. So let's see if he comes back. I was just going to ask Matt about the rainbow gatherings and Freeman Fly, who I know was a frequenter of those. Oh, are you back?
Oof, where did it cut out? How far did we get?
I heard you finish the end of the sentence, and I was just going to reply. So I think we caught your last comment pretty good.
Oh,
And yeah, so just I
okay.
was curious. Do you know Freeman Fly?
I'm not sure if I do personally, but the name sure rings a bell.
Okay.
Yeah,
He's
it definitely sounds like a rainbow type
Yeah, he was one of the original
character.
truthers out there. shared a studio with Alex Jones maybe before he was controlled or co-opted or whatever that is. And he was a frequenter of the Rainbow Gatherings. So you probably would have run into him. He was like, doing the classic thing, traveling in a bus and living on his wits and just, letting moment to moment carry him through life, getting all his needs met without knowing how that was going to happen. And I've had him on. I actually lost my first YouTube channel. I won't say like it was his fault or anything like that, but he was the last interview that I did when it got canned on Controlled Op, actually. That was the subject we were talking about.
What an interesting one for us to get lost.
Can you say that again? It's kind of cutting
Am I coming through? I said, what an interesting topic to have that stream go out on.
Right. It was
Can
a
you
whole
still hear me,
series.
Beth? Is it rough?
I can hear you. I can hear you. If the connection doesn't hold, you could turn your camera off. I love to see you. Of course, everyone loves to see you, but that would be one way. It takes less bandwidth to transmit audio.
Took work. Okay. Yeah, it's so strange. Give me 1 second, because we did good last time and it worked, but for some reason right now my my Wi-Fi just dropped. So give me 1 moment. I'm going to try and see if I can restart it.
Okay, give me a thumbs up when you're ready again. All right, so we'll just take a little break there and come and say hello in the chat if you like, and share this out. Here is the link for today's stream. We are live on Rumble and we are live on X. This is the blog with both. Well, not both of those links because I did a real last minute Rumble, but at least YouTube will be there. And hello, Hiker 1041. Nice to see you. And he said, thanks for hosting this. Really big fan of Michael and pioneering the glass scene like he has. And you're calling him Michael. Oh, it's funny. Did I get Matt wrong? Really awesome to get a deeper dive into his background. Yeah, exactly. I totally love this too. It's without those little threads from my background, I doubt I would have tuned in at all. But he was a fan of one of my past guests, and that's how all of these breadcrumbs got followed. So, Matt, okay, good. I'm not getting it wrong. That you're not Gus. I'm not confused. All right, and we're good to go. Let's see how that worked. Hello, hello.
Okay. Hey there, can you hear me? I'm still just seeing my cellular data, and somehow my battery said it's too hot. It's like 100 degrees here, and I think something with the Wi-Fi may have done something. But am I coming through right now?
The sound is perfect. The image is a little bit pixelated, but it's just fine. Yeah, as long as we can hear each other. That's great.
I guess we'll just try to keep running from here then. Yeah, as you were mentioning, a friend of yours, Freeman, who had been very woven in with the Rainbow Gathering family, which again would have been my first entrance into kind of Deadhead land, and then also the functional glass art world, which is a direct descendant of the Grateful Dead concert experience.
I see. Okay, so the Rainbow Gatherings were actually born of the Grateful Dead scenes.
Well, it's those two scenes were independent, but what I meant to say was that the glass art scene, the glass pipe, functional glass art, it would be a direct descendant of the Grateful Dead scene, but there was so much overlap between the Grateful Dead scene and the Rainbow Gathering scene that really you'd see so many of the same characters. Like the first place I saw live pipe making was in the middle of the forest at a Rainbow Gathering. But then I found out soon after that it really had its like functional art glass pipes as we know it now. That whole scene did have its roots in the Grateful Dead scene. It started really with a man named Bob Snodgrass, who I've mentioned before. He started making color changing glass pipes probably by the mid 1980s, and then he found out about the Grateful Dead tour, and so he started traveling with the Grateful Dead and selling the color changing pipes at the concerts on the parking lots, alongside people selling the tie-dyes, the hemp necklaces, the grilled cheese sandwiches, and all that stuff, beaded necklaces, So really pipes got their American artistic functional glass art pipes got their entire sort of mystique and coolness directly from that particular scene, that scene of Grateful Dead concerts and traveling around from city to city, so like a lot of like head shops in different communities and states and cities around the US, they would have to go to a Grateful Dead show parking lot to get these glass pipes to bring back to their stores, because it was that it was that gate kept, so to speak. At that point, it really took a while. It was the mid 90s or late 90s, probably, before functional art glass pipes made its way out of the Grateful Dead scene and started hitting the cities and kind of being something that more than just deadheads and pipe shop owners knew about.
Right. Very cool. NAD said she may or may not be enjoying a glass item at this moment, taking a little break. So yeah,
that's what's up.
Subtext going on. Yeah. So if you're not familiar, if you're just tuning in with this interview and didn't see the first one, banjo is widely regarded as one of, now I know you don't really like this term, and we're contextualizing it, and you already paid some tribute back to Bob Snyder, but he is regarded, regardless of how he humbly thinks of himself, as the godfathers of the functional glass community. And so this is his work is, of course, functional. It has to work, and functional for the purposes of consuming cannabis products. So whatever is a weird way to say that these days. It's gone pretty commercial, I guess is the way to say it. And you've also had some really big breakthroughs in recently. I know you were sending me the news about the is it the fine art community? So I want to talk about that. We'll definitely get to that, where you're at right now, and how this has again organically moved itself forward. Not because you said like, oh, I'm a great artist and I should be recognized in the fine arts community, but it has grown of its own accord because the people are choosing and voting for it. So before we go into that, I want to back up and just talk about, what was it that attracted you to these communities? Like you called it a parking lot, right? That's my memory of it. There was the concert, and then there was the parking lot, and they were in a way two worlds, not different worlds or separate worlds, but the parking lot was like a little village or a city, and people had their wares. They were selling things, like you said, grilled cheese sandwiches, and because there were people who, I think, literally did themselves live through that community, made their living, right? They would travel from show to show and they would sell their wares. And so what was it that drew you into that whole community in the first place?
That's such a good question, and it opens the door to so many deeper anthropological concepts, socio critique. I would say that growing up in the Midwest, my mom was a special education teacher in a fairly urban, kind of industrialized part of Lower Michigan. And my dad was a dairy farmer up in Western Michigan. And so I spent my childhood growing up between those two kind of extremes, very progressive, modern, global culture oriented experience with my mother, who was a member of the Baha'i faith, which is a world religion out of Persia. So that's, at the very, that's one iteration, one experience. And then on weekends and holidays and summers, I'm up with my dad in the very farming, kind of traditional conservative communities of Western Northern Michigan. So somehow through all those years, neither, and I don't know if it's from the bouncing back and forth and never quite feeling completely of one culture or the other. But after all those years, when I got to college, I found skateboarding. To back up just a little bit, I found skateboarding late in junior high school, early high school. So throughout my high school years, I kind of was identifying as like alternative skater kid. This is like the 1990s, And so when I went to college, I graduated high school in 1994. And I went to college kind of with that, I'm a skater dude. I'm not really this, I'm not really that. Because the skater culture, obviously, kind of being born out of the surfer culture, the Southern California surfer culture, also had its on the outside kind of vibe to it. It was very countercultural, so to speak, or at least that's what we thought. We're countering the regular culture. I'm not doing Paul Abdul. I'm not doing Garth Brooks. We're like over here, in the other option. And so when I went to college for 3 years, I studied art history, sculpture, originally, and then I wound up in sculpture and photography by the end. But somewhere in there, I found out about these rainbow gatherings. And so I went, on one spring break, I traveled all the way to Florida with some friends to go to this rainbow gathering. And it was almost like just a light went on in the sense that everybody there were sort of misfits, societal, a lot of artists, musicians, a lot of kind of outlaw folks too, a lot of just antisocial, like not getting with the program society folks. The kids are in detention all the time and maybe smoking, across the street from school instead of being in class. Like it was just a total misfit freak party. And everybody there seemed really genuine and really accepting. And they really came from all walks of life. Like there were people at the rainbow gatherings I met that were sort of outcasted from maybe an inner city type of experience. There were people there who had outcasted from the suburbs. There were people there just straight from the bayou. There were people there from the farm. Everybody was there around the campfire because rainbow gatherings don't have electricity within them. They're campfires all around like out in the middle of the forest. So it's like a very different way to meet with other humans. And like I said, the lights just went on. What was it that attracted me to that? I think it's that there wasn't anything in the common upbringing, either in the city or on the farm, that was strong enough to call me to want to come and plug in and be a part of it. In the ways, at least, that I saw, like the doorways that I saw to that, like you're going to go the white collar world or you're going to go and milk cows with your dad. Neither of those two options appealed to me. And when I ran into these folks traveling around, the forest, going to different events and concerts. And this is like, people at rainbow gatherings where you would just as soon see them at like a dead parking lot or a Grateful, or a fish show, or, at the time festivals weren't quite going on just yet. But this is right at the beginning before we would have started seeing like Burning Man or these large transformational visionary music festivals, all the thing. But like, that's a long answer to a very simple question. What was it that attracted me to that group? It was a certain sense of freedom. I had read On the Road by Jack Kerouac. I had, through my experience and experiments with marijuana and other, say, psychoactive medicinal plants, things like that, like through reading about the lore of the generations that came before me, and finding out about this sort of, this third direction that became available, at least let's say through the 1960s, and by the time I'm, at 20 years old in the 1990s, that experience was still held alive. That flame was still carried strongly by the Grateful Dead and by the rainbow gatherings and by the beginnings of this sort of festival type of society. So, I think freedom is what attracted me, the sense of freedom and being able to just express, play music, meet strangers, share art, not have a job. This could go to a lot of subjects like, I was diagnosed with ADD when I was in like 4th grade, I think. So I was one of them first test experiments with the pharmaceutical grade drugs to cure the aberrant, you're not paying attention to your studies, Matthew. You're drawing pictures of castles and, dragons and spirals in the margins of your homework. Maybe this drug will help get you online. So like, I think there's just a certain portion of us, my understanding at least about like what they call ADD or ADHD, I've seen perspectives about that say it's actually like a genetic throwback to our pre-agrarian, pre-city building past. Like, if you look at human timeline of at least the conventional understanding of how long we've had modern humans, Homo sapiens sapiens, fully developed frontal cortex. Like conventional archaeology has that timeline at about 200,000 years. And so that same conventional story says that we began with the reading and the writing and the smelting and the kilns and brick making and farming. I mean, all the things that stratified society, all the things that in history class they teach you are the signposts, the indicators that we're a civilized now, and that before this we were uncivilized, right? We were running around with dreadlocks, beating on drums in the forest, worshiping, personified nature spirits, and it was just this primitive, back then kind of way of thinking, hunting and gathering and blah, 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 the story, So I read this book called Hunter in a Farmer's World, and it was written by this man, Tom Hartman. It's given to me by a teacher of mine when I was kind of going through this sort of, okay, so I'm different than everybody else. The electroencephalograph, when they read my brain waves, I couldn't even keep my eyes still long enough for them to get a good reading, and why is that? I still don't know. I know that things like, this is a ramble I'm giving you right now, Beth, but like I know that things like sugar and, artificial things, lights and artificial foods and stuff, they can cause a lot of what we think of as symptoms or indicators of like an ADHD or ADD mind or whatever. And I'm not discounting all that, but back to this idea of ADD and ADHD and maybe all kinds of other neuroatypicalities, these are possibly just traits that humans had more more widely prior to the domestication of our species and of our cultural norms and societal, structures. So like the hunter would be the ADD mind, always alive. The neurons are just going everywhere. Like, what's this over here? Look, oh, there's a squirrel. Oh, it's this, that, you have to be all in it to be able to survive and live. And then there's the farmer perspective, which this Tom Hartman likened to the non-ADD mind or the neurotypical mind. The farmer perspective would be very patient and linear. Drop the seed in the ground, cultivate the earth, drop the seed in the ground, tend to it, water it on this day, give it some fertilizer. It's very linear. At the very end of the cycle, then you harvest, and it's just this sort of, it's linear, So when you have a kid's, like I was the type of kid where if it wasn't extremely interesting to me, it was very difficult to keep my attention on the studies and the regular school lessons and stuff. And so I was, marked by the teacher, like he's having a hard time concentrating. It must be his problem. So again, it sets up that sort of, the right way of thinking, which would be get in line, go to recess when you're allowed, ask to go to the bathroom, all these things that are, when we look at our human history of 200,000 years, this having to listen to the boss and stay in a little four-walled room, for most of the day thing it's just a blink of an eye when you look at our human ancestry. So let's say this culture is 5,000 or 6,000 years old, 7, whatever, post-alluvial, Tigris-Euphrates River Valley, the Nile, the Indus Valley, whatever we say the beginning of civilization is or where it was. The conventional experts all have it being 5,000 or 6,000 BC. So that's not enough time for an entire physiology and a biochemical system of a animal to switch over. So it's like this, I guess I'm a genetic throwback to back when humans were a little more natural or something. And those of us that have that kind of neuro setup, again, back to your original question, like schools and structures like that are going to be a little less attractive and satisfying, and petri dishes where the culture is allowed to jump around and laugh and have fun and play and discover itself, unimpeded by societal norms, is going to be more attractive. So that real quickly, that kind of setup, I think is very that fits right in with the glass blower thing. And so glass is something that when you're manipulating it and when you're working with it, you have you have the heat, you have centrifugal force, you have gravity, you have flame chemistry. How much of it, how much oxygen, how much propane, how fast are you spinning? Each of the different colors have different, very finely, you got to kind of notice which one's like this much heat, which one's like that much heat, because it'll boil and crackle and pop, and you can ruin your colors if you aren't using the right color, the right flame, and where in the flame you're holding it. All that just pertains to one tiny facet of how glass and color melts. And so then you bring in like shapes and all the different things you have to think about in order to make it work. For people who have that kind of always alive, hard to pay attention kind of neuro, when you jump onto the torch and start melting, and naturally you have to start keeping track of all these things, and it's like it gives all of your different chords of attention, let's say, it gives them each something to bind to. And a lot of us, and I think it's this way with a lot of different art forms, especially physical ones, but there's a certain point, and I have this reflected every time I bring this subject up around fellow glass artists. We're all ADD, like almost all of us, like if you look at, and then you look at other artists and you start getting into their stories, almost all artists are too. So, there's just something to that. I think that some of us, we could jump back. I said real quick, I lied. We go over to the Joseph Campbell thing where, he says like artists are the myth makers of their time. There's something about creative, the unlocking of creative potential, or the unlocking of creative practice that does, I think, create so powerfully that we examine history all the way back to pre-writing times through that lens of what were the artistic and creative contributions of this type of people, of this group of people. So I don't know, I don't like the whole idea that, oh, we creatives need to do this and that so y'all non-creatives can enjoy it. I really think that everybody's a creator and everybody's an artist. But I have noticed that those of us who have been fortunate enough in our life to have found a creative path and tied that to whatever spirit it is inside of us that is innately human, I think that's something we just notice and need to strengthen and push into more.
Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness, how much great stuff
I can be done there. That was a long ramble.
That was great.
I hope that the audio at least was decent.
It was, yeah, it was totally holding on. I want to go back to a bunch of those points, but just say hello to Quietly Contented Bear, and Annie Dees says that she is working with an interesting piece with bubbles in a grid pattern. That it's amazing. Just to jump ahead, like it's the furthest thing. I'm glad you unpacked the process of making glass. I have a fascination with it. It's never moved me to actually get in a workshop or anything like that. You should do one, and I'll come.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'll let you know.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's the opposite of ADD. You are literally, or maybe it's the same, because like you said, you're having to pay attention to so many elements at one time in order to, is the word finesse it into a particular shape and a particular color and a particular function.
Oh
right?
yeah.
So much of art ends up accidental. I've done a lot of accidental art in my life where it ends up amazing and beautiful, but it wasn't because I had the knowledge and the finesse. It was just, that thing barfed out of me, and it was a lucky hit. So this is, it's fascinating. I mean, the diagnosis of ADD is, first of all, it has been, I think, engineered, and I want to go back to this in terms of the amount of the culture that has, in fact, created the counterculture, right? Like they needed that part too. Right. You know this already, so that's beautiful. And just want to see a few more of the comments that Annie was imagining a banjo made of glass with a very delicate sound. No doubt you've got some pieces that reflect that. And college art. I also had actually quite an amazing college art, not college, but it was my high school art teacher who really nurtured me. And I came in high every day, just to, full disclosure there. And it worked really well together. There was one day when I didn't, and she's looking at me and she's all suspicious, and she's like, "Is something wrong with you?" She says, like, "Oh yeah," but that was she totally nurtured me. Annie's talking about Humboldt, that she was in Humboldt in the early 1980s, and Hiker's saying, yeah, rumble or not, Matt is nailing it. I just love talking to this guy.
Thanks, Hiker.
And then back to the conformity that really, I think that's now, say, post-pandemic, pre-pandemic too. It's not that it was a new thing, but we all gathered around the fire of freedom, and it turned into a slogan and a chant and freedom, freedom, and it almost,
Amazing.
yeah, amazing. And it got completely, misunderstood what is freedom, because I actually have done a chart of purpose. I consider purpose and freedom to be the very same thing.
Oh, I like that. Yes.
Right? Purpose, of course, being a great responsibility, almost an obligation or a debt to repay. That's a whole other subject. But, so most people don't associate freedom. They think it's the opposite. No responsibilities, no one to answer to, do whatever you want all the time. And this, sure, there is a rebel's freedom where you've been in chains and then you just want the chains off, and to be able to individuate, to be yourself instead of what the society needs you to be. So it is a step and a stage, but not necessarily the whole destination in that. Yeah, and that I love that you're talking about the hunter-gatherer societies and the agrarian societies. You got your Cain and Abel
Oh
in
yeah.
there, right? Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
That whole story, and the
Cannibal.
cannibal. We yeah, in fact, we did
That was a
make a
great
pact with
sync that
that.
you shared last time we talked. Yeah,
Right,
I've thought
right,
about
right,
that a lot.
right,
It's
right.
self-devouring, it's like this culture is
Mhm.
self-devouring essentially, you know? And I mean,
Right.
I guess certain things are undigestible, so hopefully we'll be those things that are just undigestible by the machine. There's some spark of light that I think is at the center of everything, and humans, I think even more, call me a call me a kingdomist or a speciesist, but I think humans are like a little more able to hold this light in some or able to hold it in a special way. We're talking about it, we're communicating about it. Maybe it's that we don't understand it as much as the raccoons, the possums, the deer tick, the eagle. I don't know, but there's something unique about the way that we hold this light or this spark of creative energy, whatever it is. Like two things came to mind. That you mentioned the freedom and purpose are the same, and immediately to my mind the thought came that there is freedom in purpose, and it's when we're acting out of our purpose, or in alignment with our purpose, that we feel most free. I don't think that that's too woo-woo to say, or too vague. And that the other thing that it reminds me of, it was quite a long ramble that could have been many different branches to many different worlds, but during one of my monologues a minute ago, I wanted to bring back around about the way that when you're working with glass, and again, I know this goes for music and art and other mediums too, but very specially and specifically, in my opinion, with glass, when you're in that place and you've got all of your different tendrils of awareness and attention, and they're all locked in with the different things they have to be locked in with. Let's say if you're driving a car real quick, like your clutch, your brake, your steering wheel, your shifter, your mirrors, your dials, there's at least a handful of things, and a lot of people find a lot of peace while they're driving, just because there's just enough of your attention is occupied on the physical world where it has to be, that you have a sense of freedom. And so with glass, and again, I've heard this time and again, when you're working with it, and even if you just jumped on, I hear this from beginners who have only have a few minutes or hours on the torch, that moment when they know how fast to spin the rod, where to stay in the flame so the amount of heat is just right, the kind of flame so that it doesn't boil the colors. And then if we're that far, you can see it, people's eyes light up. And that's before even starting to pull it and to stretch it or to grab a tool to manipulate the shape of it. And so there is it's very therapeutic. I've watched and I've helped people who have come in, just friends of mine say, who work in the more conventional world, maybe carpenters or builders or just people who have regular jobs, who I'm friends with, who will come in and I'll jump on the torch, and they'll hop on the torch and they're just like wide-eyed about it. Like, wow, I can't believe it. Like, I had a friend that was in AA and had been sober from alcohol for a lot of years. And when he found glass through my shop, now this is somebody that's, he didn't have a problem or with other substances. He'd smoke some weed, have some medicine journeys, whatever. But alcohol specifically was a no-no. He had been sober for a long time. He'd still go to meetings now and then, but he just didn't really vibe with the sort of all or nothing and the structure of that whole thing. But when he found glass, he said that like 3 or 4 hours would pass and he wouldn't have, it'd just be nothing but peace. It was like he's never more at peace than when he was just melting some stuff. And this is just a beginner. This isn't somebody that knew what he was doing or developed the practice. So again, I think that probably scales across many creative art forms and different things and music and stuff. But with glass, there is a lot of factors to keep track of. And when our mind can plug in with all those different things, then I think we can feel a sense of purpose and freedom within that purpose. I mean, it's my purpose not to let this blob of glass fall down on the bench, or to get too cold and then shock and break into a million pieces. I mean, it doesn't have to be a deeper purpose, but just tagging back on the freedom and purpose idea and them being the same thing. I like that. I'm gonna carry that.
That's awesome. Yeah, and there's so many layers of purpose, and I often talk about doing everything purposefully rather than having, because purpose is a kind of destination that I am here for this reason to, and you couldn't. I would never say your purpose is to blow glass, but you have done it purposefully. You've done it on your purposeful journey, and there might come a time, maybe or maybe not, where you take that purposeful journey in a different artistic direction or a different kind of a focus, but it's going to be the same thread of purpose regardless. And I just want to reflect, because I've been studying the work of Gurdjieff a lot. Shout out to Micah Ellers. We just did a great snippet video for the Private House of Free Will, which you're now a member of. Welcome.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about false personalities and the mechanicalness of life, that when you're just in your ordinary frame of mind and you're not focusing like you are on multiple factors at one time, the false personalities tend to rule. They get all of the life energy. And so then we go through life in a mechanical way, in an unconscious way, in a programmed way, from more the language that I use, I should say. And then so when you apply yourself like that to multiple factors and you devote your attention, then the false personality is as if not there. It comes back, you might notice, like you can still go and get unhappy about the things you're unhappy about, or stressed about what you were stressed about, or needing of what you were needing. But it gets that. The same thing happened to me when I had my young son and I had an attachment parenting kind of style. And so I was on 24/7 for quite a long time. I felt quite enlightened by that. And I'm not being prideful. I'm just saying, like, I didn't have my own problems anymore. I was fully devoted to every little, yeah, you can tell. I can tell you're vibing with that. So anyway, I just needed to share all of that.
I think that's beautiful. I love to hear that reflection. I haven't mentioned in this podcast, but I have 6 kids myself, 5 daughters, and my wife and I my kids were fortunate enough, and my wife and I were fortunate enough to encounter the attachment, parenting, that whole world at the very beginning, at the very start. Probably because we both hang with a lot of back to the landy type, curious about how to do family in a better way than conventionally that we were raised. So I can tell you, my wife, I mean, we had babies. Both of us had babies clinging to us, hanging on us for almost 2 decades. It felt like. I mean, there's a 10-year gap between my oldest and my youngest. So, we were kidding for a while, and like that whole. This is the most important thing to do, and to give ourselves entirely to being there for the kids. Have you ever read the Continuum Concept? Have you ever heard of that book?
No.
Okay. It was written by a lady that she's like a supermodel from France or something, who wound up living with a tribe in the Amazon for, I think, a couple years. And she observed the way that the parents were with the kids and how it was this entire different thing than she was used to. Letting the kid, sting himself on the nettles, letting the kid burn himself on the coals underneath the fire, and every time the kid was like, wah, wah, not freaking out about it, but just being available all the time. Like there's an expectation. I believe that the attachment parenting concept emerged out of work she did, and when that started going around like in the 60s and 70s. But she observed that there's an ancestral continuation, the continuum of the child expects the parent to be there as long as they need the parent to be there. And if there's a healthy attachment in that circumstance, then that creates the most secure young children who become the most secure adults, And like I said, I've got a lot of kids. My youngest are 16, twins, and my oldest is 27. And so I have four of my kids are over 18 now. So I can observe them as adults in the real world and really see, at least from my biased perspective, how correct that attachment parenting style and all of those types of ancestral. I say ancestral because if it works, it's probably biologically in us, like anything that works good for us, ancestral foods, ancestral diets, being close to nature, all the things that make the healthiest, happiest human. I mean, it's kind of inspiring to think that for 195,000 years, those were strong enough inherent needs or expectations in us that even now in this crazy, confused, blink of an eye, castle building society we're in, you can't just like delete it. You can't delete it, even with 6,000 years of, now forgive me everybody for my language, but patriarchal ontological brainwashing, the whole top down hierarchical, the pyramid thing. I mean, we could go deep on that, but like that type of way of structuring society is only 7,000 years old, as far as we know. I mean, at least conventionally. We're not getting into ancient aliens and Tartary or anything else like that. Just conventionally, what the agreed upon, what they're saying at college nowadays. We're very fresh and new, like to all of this writing and organizing society into haves and have-nots and tax paying and all that stuff. It doesn't vibe with our biochemistry. It doesn't vibe with our mythical storytelling nature, our creative. I mean, we get little clues. You're made in the image and likeness of your creator. There's little clues dropped in, which I think are for those with the eyes to see and ears to hear, not to get biblical language or anything, but we're Westerners. It's right there, To me, the easiest way to find it is to get in touch with your creative core, the core of everything that's inside of us that creates our experience. I'm going to call this a good day or a bad day. I bet I'm going to be correct. Like whatever creates the experience, like I'm an artist. Yeah. Or I'm not artistic. Watch. That'll probably be the way that you create your reality if that's what the program that you're telling yourself is, So real quick, back to the Gurdjieff thing that you said, the false personalities, that it just reminds me, I had a teacher, a meditation teacher, an energy work teacher who would refer to it, and she was very Jungian and kind of in what she was interested in, her frameworks and lenses. But like when going into a meditative state and starting to just observe what comes up, those false selves, she would call them subtypical egoic structures. And so another friend of mine, like another glassblowing friend, Phil Siegel, he would refer to it, the whole thing as like the boardroom in your mind, and your awareness, your true self, your eye behind the eye should be the head of the board. And all of the other members of the board, when things are in good balance, they're there to take directives from the big I, the I behind the I. And so I still need to dig more into the Gurdjieff. Since you mentioned it, I joined the thing and I listened to a couple other of the talks that you had, but I haven't dipped into the Gurdjieff specifically yet, aside from like Enneagram stuff, like I said, which I've been quite interested in for a couple decades. But like specifically going in on Gurdjieff's understanding and framework, does that ring a bell at all? Is it when he's talking about false selves popping up? Do you think that's similar to the subtypical egoic structures? They're
Uh,
like,
Actually, that part I don't know because they can be really specific definitions. It sounds in the right ballpark, and I'm
not
not.
self, like not selves, but voices that, the archetypical personalities say. Like we don't want to have the overachiever, which is has a job to do. But if the overachiever's at the head of the board, then that can lead to trouble. Or the prostitute, or the never does wrong part, the never does right part, all of those being false senses of self that our program sometimes just start running on its own.
Yeah, it sounds the right alley. So I haven't studied that, which makes me hesitate not to just speak.
Sure.
But it sounds the same. And yeah, there's like Gurdjieff would say there's a legion of false personalities, and yet we feel to be one I, and so that's the illusion. That's the what you have to break down to be able to start observing that. Oh, who's talking, who's
That's
driving.
exactly what I'm talking about. I think it's the same when you
Mhm.
mentioned that, because it's like they all feel like me. I mean, I would assume, and I'm not sure what his take on this, but
Yeah,
unconsciously we start to identify with all of the different subtypes, the aspects of self. The overachiever may have came online when we were 5 and needed to do something amazing to get the attention from our caregivers. And they're
exactly.
like, good job. And then we just keep on, okay, that's a good one. I got the kind of love and acceptance I wanted and needed. And through that particular, and so then you begin to identify, you can't tell the difference because all of these different subtypes are set up at a time when your consciousness isn't developed enough to really know what's going on. But we can fragment, and anybody who's into like anime or like Voltron, the cartoons where the big robot would just turn into a million little robots and go do all kinds of cool stuff, but then it really came down to it, they would all assemble back in, like with Transformers. Like the guy's like got a loader bucket tractor for a right arm, and he's got a dump truck for a leg and a cement truck for his other leg, and just at the right time they all come together to do the big battle. And so I think that there's probably a story in that, in a similar way, like when we're adults and we have these battles, or these maybe they're just cycles of heroes journeys that we're you know are going through. There comes a time when all of these different subtypical personalities that established in early childhood in order to protect our light from these different perceived threats, or perceived not going to get enough of what I need, or, these subtypes all if we're lucky, we can we can call them back in and give them better jobs that are supportive to our growth and healing. And maybe the one that's always telling us we're not good enough, we can get that one to be like, yeah, you're awesome, and just make friends with these selves. It's like a disintegration that happens when we're early on, but it's such a beautiful process because it's what saves us from being completely destroyed by this. I don't want to blame culture or society, but it's rough. It's rough incarnating into this society for a human spirit that maybe had 195,000 years of like just the main things to worry about were the yearly fight with the next door tribe, or getting burnt by the stove, the fire, or the venomous snake. But those kinds of things, if we look really at indigenous societies, like that doesn't really happen that often. But they're normally just chilling. Like for the most part, they're and having a good time throughout most of the day. We know from studying what few are left, so not so with us. You could be in a really happy little household with no violence or meanness at all, and still you're going to school, and all of a sudden all the threats start coming at you. This is just a wounded public school, casualty speaking. I know that not everybody's had the same experience or the same upbringing, but I'll cut off my rant for now.
Yeah, I can relate to that. The whole problem, if you can say it, and it's also entirely necessary. And I want to go back to talking about culture, but and it's not unrelated by any means. It's the identification with the false personalities, like you said at the very beginning, that they feel to be you. They feel like you because they've been around and they operate, and they're mostly, again, unconscious. You can't consciously operate out of a false personality that then transforms it. And some of it does come about by traumas, by abuse, by like even just the normal life. But the expression that comes up in Beelzebub's Tales to his grandson, this like tiny little book, is the terror of the situation. And this is something that it's easy to go through in our daily lives without noticing. In the Toltec reflect this too. Joel Schaefer's
I thought of the same thing when you mentioned terror. Yes.
Right. Like to be aware of the moment to moment terror of the situation. Now, no new agers or spiritual people want to talk about that. For them, it's all the love and the light. But those are buffers of the false personality, keeping away reality. And we need to individuate. We need to identify in order to get to that place where we could make a new choice about those identifications, and begin to deprogram them, and start to like bring about the situation where there could be one I, which is the life's work, right? It's not, you can't do this. It's like growing a tree. It's gonna take some time. That's how Micah says it. And so yeah, there's so much in there we could really geek out. Maybe we need a third interview for that.
Yeah.
I'm not totally sure about the narratives, because I really bought them too about ancient cultures and compared to modern culture. They've been pitted against each other, just like nature versus the like say natural medicine versus conventional medicine, or red versus blue, or
Sure.
it's the same kind of thing.
It's so hard to know, what the actual history. Everything we know about it comes through the controllers, scientists, and we're learning about, we're hearing about how some tribe lived, and the account is from like some missionary in 1847 that went to where this tribe was. And so even the most honest and, let's say, authentic human that might have been a missionary, and or whatever, it's how are you going to get like what the actual experience is like? And now, I mean, with the rate that indigenous first peoples have been exterminated and dispossessed of their way of life, it's less and less now. I mean, 50, 60 years ago, that wave of people that was trying to put this all together, which, again, like, I think the psychedelic revolution, so to speak, whether it was, I'm not going to say whether it was or not, to whatever extent that it was helped along or curated or controlled by the predator engineering class, to whatever extent that's the case, putting that aside, when people have experiences with psychedelic plants or, marijuana, LSD, compounds that change your perspective. I mean, when you look at how many people were interested in going back to the land, and eating like a ton of carrots every week and juicing things, and I want to have my own garden, I want to raise my family outside away from the cities. I mean, there's a real thing when I'm not saying that all of those substances don't also have the propensity to sometimes become like this thing that you addictively cling to because you can't handle the reality that's right here. I mean, I've been on both sides of that. I don't know what how much I would be seeking to reunite with nature and raise my children in a way that has them feeling more connected and full of their experience on this beautiful world and with their family. It's hard to say. Like I don't know how I would have done life if my eyes hadn't been opened up in those particular ways as a young adult, And at the same time, uh, that also can be a way that I think you can just get trapped in that space. And maybe that comes into the love and lighty stuff. We see a lot of that with the kind of psychedelic visionary community and love and light brother and all that. I'm not downing on that. I am the type of person that is like love and light. I'm coming from that perspective, but I also know that fear and darkness play as important of a role in us coming into completion or possession with our disintegrated selves as anything else. Like I think of it like the yin yang, where you're on the light side of the yin yang, everything's just yay, it's great, and there's this one little black spot, and you're like, what is that? Ew. But then you just can't take your eyes off it, and then eventually you get too close. The next thing you know, you're just like, and you're sucked into the black side, and next thing you know, you're black pilled. And then you're in there just like, oh yeah, and then you know all the things there is to know about the cabal and the Skeksis and the predators and the parasites and the heads. You got it all figured out. But eventually you're just like, hey, what's that little white light, And then you focus on that, and eventually, if you're lucky, I think, whoosh, and you're up onto the light side. So it's like, I know that we all go through that. Those of us that are blessed enough, I think, to be curious about how this place works. I know we all go through that maybe a few times. And lately, I guess my model is like, I wonder, how can a part of me rise above that? And I don't mean above, better, worse, but like physically, can I hold space for the major part of the black thing on the black part of the yin yang and the big white part on the white part, and acknowledge there's a little bit of the black and the white and a little bit of the light and the dark, and just see it all whirl? And is there some point where it just becomes boring and gray from that perspective? So I need to jump back down in? I don't know. I mean, yeah, I'm bringing up more questions, I think, than answers, but that's something a simple model I've been playing with lately.
Interesting. Yeah, so much in there. I mean, that is part of the mechanical consciousness, is the dualistic, the two
Even the
sides.
either or I just said is that right there. Like, should I be
Exactly.
looking at it like it's gray, or should I come down and join the white or the black side again? Like, whoa,
Exactly.
like that right there is okay. I think my answer was just given to me.
Nice, nice. Yeah, and then the difference can be that instead of unconsciously suffering the highs and the lows and the ups and the downs and the this or the that, then you start to take it on and suffer it consciously and go through that, not being afraid, right? So here's part of like the psychedelic or the drug kind of culture that probably has a massive engineered part to it, but like you're saying, what each individual does with it is going to be unique. And so much of it is escapist, right? Like I want to get away from the pain of being in a controlled environment, being told what to do, what to say, and then I just want to break free and have my own thoughts and run in the forest or whatever. And so it can be a goodness, but if you're in that dualistic pendulum, which we're kind of obligated to be in anyway for a time, until there are human experiences that have no opposite. But right, I teach the scale of emotion to the coaches that I train, especially because you can track the emotions. Somebody in apathy, the lowest possible human experience, it actually makes a chord with peace,
Mm-hmm.
which to most love and light people is a destination where you get to peace, and it is actually strongly resonating with apathy, the lowest human experience. And so you're always in this, grief and acceptance so beautiful, grief so painful, but there's one inside the other. So you start to be able to map out the consciousness and see, okay, there's the duality, and where is freedom? in the de-identifying, now I can just like give information that it's not the thing that, and it's easy to go, oh, I got it now, and go away, and I've got it. But this is a work to go through and prove to yourself, to have the revelations right in front of yourself, like, oh, that pendulum I've been swinging on and trying to decide which is right,
Mm.
it's something off of that map. And anyway, there's my big long speech about that. And things do get boring and gray. You get more boring to people because you're not on the swing as much,
Yeah.
right? But then you get
Yeah.
yeah, you get access to true emotion. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, but I was going to ask you just about. I was going to ask you another question. Would I be
My
interrupting?
quick thought,
Yeah,
I did have a quick thought that
yeah,
kept coming up as you were speaking, and it was like you said, like we want to avoid the apathy, or the habit is to try and seek peace, but then it's like, I guess it's just like it's nuanced, because if we're talking about peace, then in that context, we got to step back again. We want to be at peace with that. There's apathy and there's peace. So it's like peace just like spreads into two things. One, it's like your concept of, I want to just have peace and not feel pain anymore. But like the peace with a big P, that it is our birthright. I think that the universe is in a state of peace at all times in general. I mean, sure, there's killing, and some animals eat other animals. Like you mentioned the last time we talked, the earth is always is a big predator that's always consuming us. So, but if you scale all back, it is all love. It's all beautiful thing that's ever refreshing. But how to be at peace with, I mean, it's hard for me to be at peace when there's like a fork stuck in my arm. But like when it comes to like, oh, I'm sad, or oh, I'm super happy, like, what is happy? Is that like a temporary thing when sadness is gone? Or is there like a deeper happiness that you can just have, that you're okay with, both sides of it? Like you're okay with the apathy and that it exists, and that it's something you experience sometimes, and that there's peace, and that's something too. So I don't know. That was a long thought on a quick thought, in terms of, we don't want to just like go for the love and light, but also like light is at the core of our being. And so is there something to be, maybe it's that it takes embracing darkness, or we have to tune our consciousness to be open enough to embrace the shadow, and to make room for it, and to not try and avoid it, which isn't that the whole treadmill that the new age, or at least as we understand it. It's kind of trendy. You have to admit, the last 5-6 years since COVID, it's pretty trendy to beat up on New Agers, and beat up on the New Age language. It's a pendulum, because aren't we coming into the age of Aquarius? Aren't we coming into the Mayan fifth sun? Aren't we coming into I mean, even the controllers are trying to make this new age thing with their fancy machines and stuff. So it's funny. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm not trying to say that we can't still make fun of New Agers, but we are New Agers. We do need a new age, and if that can be a
yeah.
personal thing. Every time you come out of the hero journey, don't you emerge out into a new age? I've had a few new ages in my life, and I've gotten caught in every single one of them, until it just got a little too normal, and next thing you know, I needed another adventure. So
Nice, nice. Yeah, something to break the mechanicalness and to bring greater consciousness, where you have to pay the attention. I do think the embrace the darkness and the shadow is option B of the same Kool-Aid. And but there is a peace beyond all understanding that has no opposite. The same as freedom, the same as purpose. These are just words. They're placeholders for things that can't really be described, and no name could ever hold a candle to. But it does exist.
I like the
And
sound of that. The
mhm,
peace beyond.
right, that's from the Bible. The peace that surpasses all understanding.
That's it. Because the understanding is the machinations, like
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
it's a felt thing, which we know to seek. I mean, we've tasted it. We wouldn't be talking about it if we couldn't conceptualize it.
100%, right? Like that is, you've
Yeah.
been pointing to it over and over again, the divine spark, the gift of the life,
Mm,
the unique expression of every single being
mm,
through time. Oh my goodness, just to contemplate the the incredible, this actually points towards the video we did today, and the sacrifice of the creator to uniquely, maybe like the artist, right? That
mm,
because it's a sacrifice. You sit down and you're devoting your time and all of your attention in a lot of different factors at the same time, going through the labor, right? Conscious suffering, conscious labor are the
mm,
paths to knowing yourself and to you know uh, decharging the false personalities and getting access to emotions that have no opposite and an actual true center, whereas all of our emotions are in an artificial place. Now, speaking of
mhm.
artificial, I've been looking for a little segue back, just to talk about the Grateful Dead movement. Do you feel or know or have any research about it being engineered? So much of Hollywood, so much of music, so much of, even though it was painted as a counterculture. It wasn't
Mhm.
on the radio. It wasn't, and yet it had such a big push to it. What's your reflection on that?
Yeah, I would say that for me, I, because I still am a Grateful Dead fan, and so I still have a good bit of me that's looking for treasures in the hunt, and not only looking for the overall, the evil part. It might be that simple, but like I do I do feel like the entirety of the psychedelic revolution, um it's hard, it's like a chicken versus and an egg kind of thing, because you can't remove the engineers fingerprints. They're all over it. I mean, LSD was discovered in a laboratory in Basel, Switzerland, by a pharmaceutical company, and for
Right.
2 decades prior to it, um, getting the cat getting let out of the bag, let's say, which lore will tell you is largely because Timothy Leary got too loose with it, was dosing divinity students at Harvard. And another funny aside, Andrew Weil, the famous nature doctor guy, he was an undergrad at the time who was pissed because the grad students were getting to do acid, and he's the one that, or one of the people that tattled on Timothy Leary going to the story. And then a cat got out of the bag, he was fired, and then next thing you know, voila, we have this whole hippie movement starting out. Tune in, turn on, drop out. That it's a fairly surface layer, I guess, entrance into that conversation, that the hippie movement was created to pull genuinely awakening and authentic and well-meaning college students from protesting the war, and to get them to come over and drop out, fuck it, who cares, nothing's real, all the kinds of things that, when measured, can be a positive uh, experience if you're having a medicine experience with some kind of mind opening, drug or whatever. Like, it's good to be able to do all those things, but that it was so broadcast and so allowed to be broadcast, it just has its, that's very convenient for those that would seek to keep people, in boxes and in predictable patterns. So, again, like it's so hard to know. I mean, I think it's 100% yes. They did everything they could, and by they I mean the big naughty they. They did everything they could to use the psychedelic experience, the culture around it, to their advantage. But I just wasn't there. I do think that, there was high level, like the MK Ultra stuff, all of that. Like, so many of the forefathers of what would become the kind of hippie movement and the psychedelic movement were themselves MK Ultra experimentees. How aware any of them were, that's another one of those things that people could debate endlessly. And so when it comes to the Grateful Dead, I don't I can't say I have a fully developed opinion on how much each one of those men knew. And if they were having conversations, not if, when they were having conversations with, let's say, a government spook or somebody, like, I don't actually know if they were like, okay, yeah, all right, so this is a big thing. You're going to use our band and our music to like totally brainwash the youth for the next 30 years. Okay, as long as you'll just let me be a rock star and let me have this nice car and don't send me to jail, then okay, guys, go ahead, do it. And you got to do what you got to do. I don't know if it was that, or I can't honestly say if the consciousness of, and now people would definitely, I mean, don't, if any deadheads ever hear this, this is just speculative, but like, if anybody had the consciousness to be able to grasp it in its entirely from that band, given my understanding from reading as many autobiographies and personal words and listening to interviews from all of the people in that band, the only one that I think would have possessed the ability to really grasp the entirety of this insane concept was Jerry. And I don't know, a lot of people say that he kind of was aware that there were fishy things going on, but he chose to look away, and that the pain that he held because of that was what drove him to all of the drug abuse and the unhealthy, lifestyle choices. And so, he was pretty adamant about not being political. I mean, he was the one that was like, yeah, man, we can't kick the Hells Angels out of the Dead show. Like, it's for everybody, man. Whereas the rest of the guys are like, hey, these scary bikers keep coming to the shows and, it's getting weird. And, so he's, at least as far as the lore is concerned, he's the one that was like not political, just wanted people to get along, etc. So, I'll say this too. And again, I don't know, but I'll be vague about it. But what I did hear that they ran into some trouble, I want to say in the early 70s, with enough of the Owsley product to just put them all in jail for life upon life upon lifetime. And so that the feds were somehow not ingenuitive enough to have penetrated their space and really nailed the upper management with massive amounts of controlled substances dealing stuff, whatever, and made them just go away. That's a hard one for me to see, like for them to have been able to operate at the very top of what would have been like a millions of people, drug market, that's a tough one. So it's like, at the same time though, I don't know, that could be a rumor about them getting busted, all that. And what I will say is that it does seem that there are certainly some guardrails that are artificial that have been put around that thing, And again, like, I don't know, and that's just the Dead thing. But if you go right before that and just look at the psychedelic experience in general, I think the chances that it was that cultural petri dish, as we've used that metaphor before, was created and supplied to people, I think the chances go up, the further you go back. But I mentioned before, I think there's a guy, David McGowan, who wrote Weird Scenes from the Canyon or Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, and he goes very in depth. He's no longer with us, but he went very in depth at all of the first wave of hippie rock stars. Families are all like a military intelligence, and so all of them, CSN, Joni Mitchell, just so many people in America. I mean, the list is way longer than way more were on that than not. And military backgrounds, Owsley had a military but then again, it brings me to the question, how much does every particular kid know? And how much could each particular artist or musician, how much could their consciousness or even hold, Like, people get in arguments about, okay, yeah, we saw LeBron James and Taylor Swift, man, they were doing some sigils, we saw them. So they must be eating babies at an elite party on an island. And then there's the other side where it's like, how do we even know I mean, we know the system itself is completely controlled. We're not debating that. And it was obviously created by, I mean, the spiritual texts all point to to the same place. That I think it's safe for us now to say, yeah, this system was created by humans, but there was other elements that, call it possession, whatever you want to call it, that guided people, to build this crazy system. But like, I don't personally know if Taylor Swift has a big enough consciousness and the ability or the reasoning to have gotten as curious as it to really unpack it all. So I don't know if she was told to do the thing by the photographer and she did it, whatever, the who had or another. And same with LeBron. Like, he's doing weird, Gnostic, esoteric rituals and stuff when he's doing a good basketball game. He might have a coach that's like, or a mentor that's like, yeah, and I'm not trying to defend either of these people, but I'm just trying to be honest about what we have evidence for. We do have evidence that these people are doing weird satanic symbols and stuff and all that. And we can see the evidence of the entire structure, basketball, all the ball games, all that stuff. It's like, that's one combo, but like, how much can any individuals who are the big stars in that know? Like, I think that some people at the top probably know it all, and that's frightening. And then I think that other people at the quote unquote top are either not smart enough to put it together, so they're not a threat to the system, or they're so smart they know not to ask the questions, and they go along to get along, and they get the money, and they do the thing, and they don't ask all the questions. That just goes for like entertainment, sports. So back to the Grateful Dead, the hippie thing being coordinated, et cetera. But you look at that outwards into like, does everybody know in the medical industry about how not okay this is? And it's like, no, most of them are trying to go golfing after work today. And if they were to even get curious, there's no golfing anymore. You're not going on vacation with your family. You're gone. And so, like, let me ask you, what are your thoughts on that? Like, on the Grateful Dead and on the hippie movement, like, where, I think 100% yes, it's controlled, contrived, and it's as bad as anybody could imagine it being. But I also think that there's sort of, on the other side of it also could be a lot more innocent in certain cases, because all people are different, and people are what ultimately make up these movements. So it's so hard to know.
Right. Yeah, I kind of agree with everything that you're saying, that it even wouldn't make sense for every cog in the wheel to understand, right? That's part of the strategy, is to make sure that we're all stratified and just in our own lane, and we only see our thing. And then they capitalize on that. People want something. They want money. They want fame. They want notoriety, or whatever it is, a legacy. I saw Joni Mitchell on one of the last times I think she ever performed, and she's gone. That woman is gone. She couldn't have been on stage independently. There was many people managing her.
Yeah.
She could barely sing. There's something has been destroyed in her. And so I think that's the product of that wanting, that desire. It's so powerful. We're willing to sell our soul, like Dylan said when the reporter said, how did you get famous? I sold my soul to the devil. And it's like, no,
Yeah.
oh, ha, right? No, this is
right.
So
regardless of how much,
mm-hmm.
yeah, regardless of how deeply he's able to integrate and grasp all these concepts, I definitely believe him when he said that. whatever that means, like, I don't know. I haven't ever had a combo with him. I mean, his writing seemed pretty deep and thoughtful and insightful earlier on, I guess, like, but also like sociopaths, can be very deep and insightful and talented at art, like
exactly. Outright genius. Right. That's
outright genius. Yeah.
Yeah.
Possessed, possessed. Geniuses get possessed too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's Okay, I won't. I'll stop trying to go into the gorge of stuff because we get derailed there. But yeah. So now the point of it, and what attracted me to do this interview is not just a call out. Oh, the Grateful Dead was an engineered movement,
Of
CIA
course.
project, or whatever it is. It's to show how within that, and not because of it, but despite it, I think there is
Yes.
an organic movement, and this is the world that you are part of now.
Yes.
That grew a little bit by a little bit, that you applied yourself. If you hadn't applied yourself as an artist and done the hard work of getting adept at your craft and connecting, you obviously have to connect with the people. It doesn't work. I mean, you've got a beautiful following on Instagram. I highly recommend going and checking out because there's so much of your work there, that there's an organic nature to it, and the people do have that people do choose and vote to a great degree.
Mm,
I think I used this example already, but the truckers movement, yes, engineered, but did the people organically rise in the
of
context of
course.
it? They sure did. The grandmas and
Yeah.
the grandpas and the grandchildren and that was stunning to me to see that capacity. It's also the public, which is the two archetypes of the public and the private. The private is kind of wild card, literally. You don't know how it's going to grow and flourish. It's just based on the will of the individuals and what they do with it. So there's inevitably going to be both. And I think the strongest thing about the engineering part really is the drugs. And I'm not morally against it. Honestly, I did find God on a psychedelic trip or two myself.
Mhm.
Now, if I pursued that path as like a path to some kind of awakening or enlightenment, it would kill me because those substances are highly toxic. I think that doesn't go unnoticed by the controllers, literally pumping that stuff into the populations. Where do all the drugs come from? Right? Like this is, you can see it in the pandemic. All of a sudden it was a really serious meth problem, and then all of a sudden the fentanyl is hitting the streets and
Amazing.
people are
Yes.
dying, right? Like, where is that all coming from? These are these are pharmaceutical drugs. They have to come through some kind of channels. Not to say people can't have their own labs, but it doesn't come en masse like
No.
that, right? And just
Yes.
enter the culture, enter the consciousness. And now we have the so-called reaction, how is it, the problem reaction solution in quotations, is that now we have safe injection sites. So they supply
Oh yeah.
all of the
Yeah.
paraphernalia, and so it's now literally become institutionalized.
Oh, they're
What
gonna
was
just give you the straight heroin sooner,
That's right. That's
as
right.
soon as they can. I remember in the 90s, when I first got out to Oregon, I started meeting other travelers and kind of outlaw people who were growing weed. And, one of my friends who had been doing it, like they would go out into the national forest and have these super hidden spots that they'd have to hike with like pails of water through. It was insane what he did, just to grow at that point. But we were getting deep talking about stuff, and he's like, they're gonna give you the weed, like they're gonna give us all the weed at some point, and it makes perfect sense. They're that confident now that they've got our attention tracked and they're doing what they want with it. Like you can probably remember when we were teenagers, 80s, 90s, like um, you'd go out smoking a joint with your friends, driving around at night, and you just see that glow coming out of every single house. And maybe for some of us, we started waking up about like, wow, man, like look at how society's just all tuned into the glow, and they're just in there watching the news, and but we ourselves we were like, we're free from that. We found this marijuana, this outlaw culture. Maybe we're exploring these other compounds, like, which I do. I put mushrooms and DMT and LSD in a little bit of a different category, say, than drugs that actually physically kill you. But just for the sake of the like the pharmaceutical stuff, but like just the sense that at that point all of those things were illegal. Marijuana is illegal, all the drugs are illegal basically. And part of it, I think, is because when you have those experiences, it does open your perception up to things that you hadn't considered before. For a lot of people, like you said, you found God, and we both know what we're talking about when you say God, and we both know that you're not saying that the substance did anything, but the fact, to you, the fact is that God was within you, and then you saw it. And so perhaps this substance acted as a tool or a way to loosen up your consciousness, where you noticed something that already was there. And so God wasn't contained in the substance itself, but the experience between you and this external thing, the substance in that case, something in that experience tuned you into, the real, the big, true, big T thing. And I can relate. But it's like I've heard it said, like doing LSD or doing psychedelic compounds can, they can help you to see how you are, how you could employ more loving kindness, but they don't make you more loving or kind,
Yes. Yes.
right? And so
Exactly.
there is a point, right? And so, like, when we look at our indigenous past, like every single group of indigenous humans that we've ever studied had a relationship with mind-altering plants, one way or another, with the exception, and I'm not even sure it's an exception, because maybe the Eskimos would get high off some kind of, whale liver or something. I don't know. Like, there's giraffe liver has a high concentration of DMT. There's tribes in Africa that hunt giraffe just to get the giraffe liver, and then they have like long extended DMT trips off the giraffe liver. But my point being that human consciousness has been inextricably linked to extraordinary experiences that are brought on through psychedelic or medicinal plants from as far back as we have been able to study humanity. And so there is something to be said about, a plant substance doing something to your physiology, which has receptor sites. Like we have an endocannabinoid system. Does that mean that I should smoke 14 joints a day, every day? Not necessarily in my case, even if I do sometimes. But I can't justify it as like, I need to do that or else I won't be able to have a full human experience. So like, I think some people might be able to have one experience with some psychedelic mushrooms that could just turn their minds on in such a way that they might be a different person the next day and never even do them again. But there's a thing there with that, So I don't know, remember what I started on this tangent for. Maybe it's back to going back to the trucker rally and creating culture. What's special about the pipe community, at least, as being a branch of that Grateful Dead tree, which the Grateful Dead, I would say, is a branch of the psychedelic revolution tree, let's say. The Grateful Dead, because they had such wide appeal and they could reach so many people, it makes sense that the controllers would come and try and put some guardrails around it and utilize that as a place to study humans and a place to maybe attract humans, and then just have how many people just went to go see a Grateful Dead show and then their parents didn't see him again for 20 years, And some situations that might have been a good thing because that kid might have come from a toxic, maladjusted reality and he found his family and beautiful love and light and people that, a place to feel loved and to give love within that community. And that might be why I didn't see him again for 20 years. But another guy, might start out with some nice marijuana. And then next thing you know, it's a lot of psychedelic use. And then after a certain amount of psychedelic use, they're not reaching the same highs. So then it's just, how do I get away from reality? Well, then you're coming into the narcotics and things like that. And we see that being the other side of it, which is, that's no good on that end. But like the glass community being an offshoot of the Grateful Dead community, there isn't and I've been thinking about this subject that you asked about in terms of like the controllability or how much can it be co-opted. I've been thinking about it for decades now, because I noticed how easily the Rainbow family and the Grateful Dead community aspects of that could be co-opted, directed, funded, you name it, all the bad stuff. I noticed that. But with this pipe thing, I mean, that was like 5 guys on a stage, and they were able to broadcast that out to millions. And the chances that you or I is going to be able to take that guitar with our friends and get that much attention, success, build a whole life by playing music for everybody, the chances are like, infinitesimally small. So that, even if people are having like Grateful Dead cover bands, we're loving the music. I love playing Grateful Dead songs still myself, being a musician, but like, it's all going to be this one thing that's easily controllable by those 5 men's addictions, basically. And every one of them had their different things that kept them from reaching their full potential as humans. Like, that's not, I don't think that's bad to mention, every one of them is written about their addictions. We can only guess what would have happened if they would have not been curtailed by their own traumas, pains, wounds, and then had them self-medicate and do the routes that they all did to try and feel whole. That's its own thing. But like, people who are controlled by those types of traumas and who have addictions, it's not that hard to keep them between the rails. You know what I mean? And so when we come to now, where I'm at within the glass community, I've been watching for 2+ decades, and we're not that easy to control or coordinate. There are thousands of glass art creators now, and I would say there are hundreds of glass art creators that make their living solely from making beautiful, creative glass art pipes. And I would say there's probably 50 to 100, at least 50 to 75 that would be capable of making work that is very similar to the kind of work I make. People who can create pieces that are this big, which involves a certain amount of time and skill, people who can sculpt, so that's a lot more than 5 or 1 band, and because exactly. Like, we came on in the late 90s, and so that was right at the time of chat rooms and internet. But just to back up, before the chat rooms and internet made us a big deal, we were traveling from show to show at all the different, like, again, before me it was Snodgrass and a number of artists that were traveling to actual Grateful Dead shows. But the year after the Dead stopped touring as the Grateful Dead, all the members were back touring. And so a pretty substantial amount of the fan base that had been following the Dead just jumped over and started following all of the different band members' side projects, until eventually, in 10 years ago, they all got together again. And then with John Mayer, who's a blues guitarist, pop guitarist guy, they all just had another 10-year run, filling out stadiums, playing that music, bringing that vibe. Now, I've been to a lot of Dead and Company shows, and it's not the same Peace Pot and Microdot kind of vibe that at least I would have thought the early Dead experience would have been. It's generations changed and stuff, but like, that whole thing is all, it's money. There's millions of dollars involved. It's controlled, it's controllable. Whoever holds the keys to the venue, I mean, there's opportunities there for fishy business. But back to the glass thing, I mean, we were organic from the start. We got our names by just simply being really dedicated to the craft and trying to outdo each other, and there's a very strong competition in glass pipe making. It's genuine too. It's like the same kind of competition that, would have hunters competing for food for the tribe that night or whatever, like, it's them against nature or them against each other to keep the tribe healthy. I'm sure, like, our greatest hunters that we have, our greatest warrior, that didn't happen because they just chose somebody, because somebody decided, hey, let's make them the big deal. It happened because real life organic shit going on. And again, an argument could be made that the Dead just did what they did in a way that people liked more than the next band over, Psychedelic Lollipop or Tangerine Daydream or whatever different psychedelic bands were around. I mean, the Dead did something that people liked enough to where they emerged out of that scene of the 60s where there's hundreds of psychedelic bands. They emerged being the flame carriers for that whole culture, that whole thing, all the way into the 90s. When they broke down and it dissipated, again, it spread out in different directions, and the glass pipe community was one of the groups that sort of caught hold of that flame and kept it alive and kept it going. And so here I am 27 years in as a pipe maker. And when I began in the late 90s, the pipe scene was just this very niche-y little have to know, need to know somebody, your friend's friend's friend. I mean, nobody knew anything about it. And so it was very pure, and it was very unimpeded on by the mass culture. And so by the 2000s, the legalization, kind of the legalized, Cypress Hill, and like a lot of, there's a lot of positive movement in the direction of like cannabis culture, so to speak, the growing medicinal qualities, all of the things started blowing up a lot more. And so in tandem with that, the pipe culture also, we got to ride on the backs of that. And so as cannabis would legalize in a certain place, or like Colorado, or I was in Oregon when it went legal, California, when Michigan, as cannabis started legalizing in different areas, the pipe culture got massive infusions of energy, so to speak, because when cannabis went legal in Colorado, before long you had corporations able to legally participate in the cannabis sales market. And so there were newly minted millionaires like happening, where people who had dispensaries and farms, corporations could come and fund people who had been operating black market under the radar for decades in some cases. And so we would experience these little pushes where we would get a little more exposure, we get a little more success, and all the while, more and more people are pouring into the space to create because it's fun. It looks amazing to see glass getting blown. When you first see it, you're just like, whoa, it looks like alchemy. You think you're watching magic or something.
I know.
You
could watch that all day long.
And that's very organic and original, and like that's very authentic. And when people, not to mention the nature of people gathering around fire, like I think that there's a strong ancestral component to the attraction that glass pipe making and the glass pipe community, which is still very, very small, all things considered. It's like the Grateful Dead would have been in like the early 70s. Like they had one hit. Some people kind of heard of them. Like we've had like barely, we haven't even gotten there yet, honestly. Like we haven't even had a hit yet because what we do is still in half the country. So, to wrap this up, like and I don't mean to go dark on it, but I'll bring it back to light. Like in the same way that once upon a time we were running around in our cars, seeing all the plastic people watching their glow boxes in their houses, and we knew we were free and that they were trapped. Now that these phones are all, full systems go, this last decade or so, I think that the naughty team, I think the Skeksis, at least are confident that they have gained enough control over enough people. I mean, the poorest neighborhood in Bangladesh, and you see little kids just sitting there huddling over the little phones, So like, there's no way to like, so I think that they either have to, it's probably a little of both. They have to give us the weed and the psychedelics, which I don't know how much you pay attention to the mainstreaming of psychedelic therapies and stuff like that. Like the part of me that venerates and believes in the important ancestral biochemical human spiritual connection that humans and medicinal plants have, the part of me that loves that, I can put that aside. When I look at the corporatization and the settler colonization of the medicinal plants and psychedelic therapy space, no bueno. You know what I mean? Like it's happening with the same team that, is developing the technologies. And I'm not trying to be negative Nancy about it, but like, I think they're confident enough, they're prideful enough, which goes, that's par for the course with these folks. We know the energy that's behind all this stuff. I don't mean to blame any humans if you're just totally lost and you've been possessed by Satan or Skeksis or the Wetiko or whatever it is, but like the whole system was created with that kind of separate humans from their natural ancestral foods, cultures, everything. It makes perfect sense that now that they have us all in the little boxes, they're like, okay, now here's your, here's your psychedelic therapies. They talk about 3D printing on demand psychedelic drugs that can perfectly fit in after you've done your little retinal scan, and like they can see exactly what you need to be able to be happy. It's total Brave New World stuff. And like, like that part there, I'm grateful that this whole thing, when it comes down to it, I think the human spirit, this is my belief, I think the human spirit will chuck the phone in the river and say, okay, that's enough. When it comes down to it. It hasn't come down to it yet. And this next few decades, I think, are going to be very interesting, because I think the people on the other team, and I can't imagine a human, is coordinating all this at these levels. I think it's a bunch of humans doing their own little parts, and the Wetiko, the devil, they say AI, artificial intelligence. I like the perspective. It's alien intelligence. And I'm not into like space aliens and nuts and bolts spaceships or anything like that, but I definitely believe in the unseen. I definitely operate as though it's true that there can be entities at multiple levels of density, from the Native American shaman saying the rock has a spirit and a wise intelligence, all the way to, even the guy on The Exorcist being like, we got a demon here who's inhabited this little girl. Like, you can give me any story that posits the existence of, ghosts or extra dimensional entities, and I more or less, I'm like, yeah, okay. When I test that, it makes sense. So in the end, I think they're going to lose. We're at a very interesting time. And one more attempt to pull it back into the glass community thing. So far, so good. There's hundreds of us. I mean, we have the usual weaknesses that every of pride and lust and power, all the things that we can be led around by our nose by, we're no different than rock stars in that case, and so, but I don't see a way to organize so far. I don't see an organized entry point to get co-opted in the same way that we see the musical community co-opted, or even the trucker rally co-opted, because fundamentally what we're doing is a physical thing, and the strongest determinant of who's going to succeed the most still comes from who is working the hardest in front of their torch, who is amicable enough and people friendly enough and likable enough in the real world glassblowing events to be able to share, ourselves personally with our fans and people. And I mean, just the idea that you could start blowing glass tomorrow, and if you really apply yourself, and you're going to have to do some wizardry on social media and portray a certain thing, but if it's honest and in integrity, you could be a very famous, successful glassblower within, I'd say, 2 years. You could be like well-known just because you're quirky. It takes a fucking serious amount of hours on the torch to get to that level. But if you love it, I think you could get those hours in 2 years' time. And if you're in an area that doesn't have, this is my pep talk to all you, any kid, if you know anybody, that some kid in your local community that's just directionless, doesn't know what to do with himself, but he's kind of creative, just show him this interview and tell him, like, look into glass blowing, because I still think there's enough room. You can go to any small town where there's no glass blower, and there's going to be cannabis smokers. And I'm not trying to, advocate for cannabis use, plus or minus. It's got its uses. But like, if you can learn a simple pipe, which most people can do in a manner a day, you've got something you can sell for $5 or $10 to the entry level enjoyer, adult cannabis user. So it's a very interesting. It's a very interesting rabbit hole, this glass pipe community. you know, and who knows, you might end up making some art or a goblet or a Christmas ornament for your aunt that she thinks is so beautiful and it's not even involving cannabis at all someday.
Yeah,
You
so
got to
much good.
stop me, Beth. I haven't even had any cannabis today, but I'm rolling on like I have.
You're excited. You're inside your purpose. It's amazing. I'm loving what's coming out of you, and just like what you're emphasizing right now is the work, right? That and this is the glass blowers. AI can't do your job, right?
No,
Maybe
I don't think
maybe
they'll ever be able to.
right, right. Yeah, yeah. You might be able to
Yeah.
robotically build. I bet there are some glass kind of manufacturing automations out there, but
Yeah,
what you're doing is different.
certain
Like you think,
things. Yeah, yeah, we wonder about that, like AI ability of glass, you know, because it's pretty in there when it comes to like your timing. It's pretty on the spot, you know. Like glass production has been automated for a long time, you know, like vases and just things like this. You know, there's machines that can do that
right,
kind of stuff,
right. A
but
person
I haven't
didn't
seen
blow
any.
this. Yeah.
No, right, but I haven't seen any reason to think that anytime soon an AI robot would be able to actually sculpt stuff. By the time you coded the machine to be able to sculpt this thing, the thing it could sculpt, nobody would care about anymore because humans are able to develop this stuff day by day, minute by minute. So, moment by moment in front of the torch. I think it'll be a while, if ever, before AI could even come close. And people are already getting sick of AI art. So that's promising. People are already noticing and putting their foot down and, you know,
Yeah. Again, back to the organic nature that includes people and relationships and competition. I love that you're pointing that out
mm,
because that's such a powerful gift of the masculine archetype. That is culture
yeah,
creation right there where you're like, oh, you made something beautiful. I bet I can do something more. And then the relationships with the people and the audience and the connections, this AI couldn't do. Yeah, they might be able to blow the glass, but will people even want that? Like I don't know if I heard you on an interview or heard someone else talk about you, but you put up a piece and in 5 minutes you've sold it. And it could be like a $30,000 piece, right? So this is no little accomplishment over time to have that kind of relationship with your community, right? This couldn't be manufactured as far as I'm concerned.
no way. It absolutely couldn't. And again, like, I mean, if we're going to see any kind of unholy collusion between glass artists and like corporate evil forces, it's going to come in the form of like endorsements, like endorsing a sports star or something like that. And
Right.
because cannabis is still illegal in half the country, we can't. It's just not going to happen, you know. So it can happen in some ways in some states, but like the Jose Cuervo of cannabis isn't legal in Wisconsin or Kansas, and so they can't. They can go and like an alcohol company can go sponsor some sports star or some music star, and then they own that guy, but it's not happening anytime soon in cannabis space because it would need to be federally legal across all levels in order, to be able to, for a company like that has to be legal everywhere they are to involve themselves. So even though a lot of our kind of outlaw, countercultural, flair has definitely taken some hits and been eroded a little bit by the legalization of cannabis, widespread across half the country. We're still very outlaw and on the outside of things on the world stage, as far as the mainstream's concerned. So, I mean, I don't like seeing people get thumped over the head and brought to jail over a plant. And so I'm not somebody that, it's just like, that's bad, like the Zen farmer, the whole thing, that's bad, that's good, or whatever, that that whole old school, oh, the farmer lose. I'll say it for everybody in case anyone heard it real quick. Like the old Zen farmer's son runs away. The neighbors are all like, oh no, that's bad. Then he comes back and he's got, 6 wild horses. You're like, oh great, that's good. And the farmer's like, maybe, maybe not. And then the son breaks his ankle on a horse trying to tame it. And they're like, oh, that's bad. The farmer's maybe, maybe not. Military comes to get the son. Son can't go to war. He's got a broken ankle. That's good. Farmer, maybe, maybe not. So real quick, like I can't say it's, it's maybe, maybe not on all of it. Like, in the same with the legalization of psychedelics, like I see certain aspects of one of the teams that definitely has bad intentions. And now that they've got all our, attention in the phone, they're confident enough that they can just give us all the mind altering things they want because they're going to be feeding the message. It's not like a shaman or someone who has a genuine connection to the tradition and the human spiritual connection to the medicine that's guiding you. It might be your phone, it might be the retina scan just checking by your retina dilation that, oh, if we just do this tweak and that tweak, we're going to give you the perfect little soma, for your what ails you. And then you can be, everyone is awesome and be happy again, So maybe, maybe not. Like maybe enough people. I mean, some people, I think some percentage of humans are more easily domesticable than others. And maybe this comes back to the ADD, neuroatypicalities thing. Maybe some of us, no matter how many generations go by, you just can't engineer the hunter out of us. And I like to think that enough of us have that awareness that when the time comes and we need to assemble like Voltron to take on the interdimensional, the big one, like I like to think enough of us will be aware that will be what steers our culture and our species back into alignment and into wholeness and toward biological diversity and thriving life.
Nice. Beautiful. Beautiful rant. I love that. Jenny's just pointing out, welcome to the chat, that robot weed isn't the same as, what maybe used to be. And that's a big factor. So, just to make this point, which is a little bit of a divergence, but a lot of the plant medicines work because they poison you. That they go and eat the liver of a giraffe is like you're eating pure poison to get high or to get,
I do it every day.
Right. And so
mushrooms are poisonous,
you get
mushrooms
high
are toxic.
because it hits your liver. So that's why it's not sustainable necessarily over the long term or in big amounts. And
it shouldn't be an escape. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to say shouldn't, because everybody's trauma is different. And I know plenty of people who are in their 80s who have, made use of psychedelic. These are first generation hippies who wouldn't change a thing. They're in their 80s. They're happy. They're like, yeah, I tripped out and did LSD every single weekend whenever my favorite rock band would come through. They don't seem to be suffering. But I also see people who are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever. I've been one of these people before who did continuously try and hit the transcend reality button via the psychedelic experience, and as a method of escape, like as a method, it can be the Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron would refer to it as like an aggression towards the now,
I
like
love Pema. She's awesome. Yeah.
Me too. One of my favorite teachers.
Yeah. She was hugely instrumental in a lot of my surviving cancer. Actually, she was
nice
reading her at the time. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. I was just going to throw in here too, also that the controllers. It's not surprising. Say Canada is completely legalized now with cannabis. You can literally fly between provinces and that kind of thing. But the commercial market is, like Jenny's saying, is pure poison. Right. You talk to anybody and don't go in those stores. Don't come out with any of their products. You don't want that because they've engineered it to be even more poison than the natural. This natural stuff has poison. It's a hyperaccumulator of nickel, like we talked about last time. But this is next level what they've done to it. And we all know that the experience of it is It's not like, we as children we were smoking joints this big, and
Hmm.
now, you have one teeny little hit of something, and it's the same
It's
level, right?
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a different kind of thing, and I don't know if you've heard of it's a collection of recordings. I'm getting it secondhand because I keep hearing that it's talked about it, but it's the Order of the Barbarians. And in this and it's back from the 60s, I believe, 67, 68, and they were revealing their plan. And the plan is not to kill everybody. The plan is to kill off those who don't have the extreme discipline and knowledge and ability to stay healthy in a world that is encroached with the toxins from every angle, in the food, in the water, in the drugs, in the, you name it. And so the path is super narrow, like really
Mhm.
super narrow. If you ever want to talk about the love your liver path that we've been on, the last couple of years, really enlightening in terms of what people in the natural health world are literally blown away. I had to detox so hard from natural health. It's a bunch of crap. Honestly, there's a few things to salvage, but barely anything. And so, everything has been weaponized against us. And if you can find that narrow path, same with consciousness, right? There's a million
Mm.
directions to go with growing the essence of who you are, and actually truly awakening humanity. It doesn't look good for us on the whole, but there is
Yeah.
a narrow path. And so this is my mission, is to gather the rare souls who have the genuine desire for freedom, the real deal, not to do what you want, but to really, live your purpose and make good on the divine spark that you've been given. and
Yeah.
and and then what can be created, what your culture, an example of this, what can grow, that is not engineered, that is not
Yeah.
controlled.
Yeah, there's a certain aspect to that, as you were mentioning that. I could feel your purpose, I could feel you in your purpose and in integrity with that purpose. And it's like something just opens up and we become like a pillar, like a pillar of light or of consciousness, which I think light and consciousness maybe are similar, they're the same, like purpose and freedom.
Yeah.
And it's like, and when we're in that pillar, I think on some level we shine in such a way like that helps others who are seeking the goodness and the truth within themselves. But we begin by looking outwards for things, who makes sense, what motivates me, and then eventually we get to a point where we're trying to figure out what in us is the other part of that equation, But I think like you said, like if a certain number of us, and I mentioned something similar not long ago also in this conversation where some of us maybe will be tuned in enough to our ancestral human goodness, our creative aptitude, or the just the faith and the belief in our capacity to create beauty and to be beauty. Like that's a big secret, like when we learn that, it's like a whoa. And that just to even hear about it and try it out the littlest bit, things will start opening up, So I think it's a good reason to stay positive, and or at least to, and again, not to deny the reality of darkness and shadow, but like nobody who has achieved anything great is a stranger to their own darkness and shadow.
Exactly. And create anyway, right? If
It's
we're
have to
if
create our way out of it.
Yeah,
Otherwise you're just going to get,
not in
you know
denial, but in the face of it.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, bringing
Yeah.
our consciousness to, or our light to it, illuminates it. We're a lot more ingenuitive when we can see what's going on
Yeah.
than trying to bury it and think of things to do to not encounter it. It's much better to
Exactly.
sit in it.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, it's the real work and the effort that breaks the mechanicalness. Because most people don't want to work, and in order to create and be free, it's work, Right.
Mm.
So that's not that popular, but good on you. So I definitely don't want to end this interview before two things. One is to talk about your recent entry into the more fine art world and to show your work because you've got so much beautiful pieces behind you that I would love to get that on
Oh,
camera. So yeah,
sweet.
how did that come about where your
Yeah.
art ended up in an exhibition?
Well, okay, so this exhibition was it was a retrospective showing the paintings and drawings of an American legendary American psychedelic painter artist named Rick Griffin. And Rick Griffin was one of the original like San Francisco poster artists that ended up doing like a lot of Grateful Dead album covers. He designed the font for Rolling Stone magazine. If anybody's ever seen the Rolling Stone lettering, how it's real ornate, nouveau inspired, that's Rick Griffin's work. So he's a very much a heavyweight in the countercultural outlaw lowbrow type corner of the art world. And so he passed on in 1990, and really nobody from that generation, at least at that time, had really ever enjoyed like mainstream appreciation for their art in like a fine art capacity. By the 80s, they were still sort of like aging hippies. I mean, they were only probably in their 40s age wise by the 80s. So they were doing all this stuff in the 60s when they were in their 20s. So very similar to glass pipe art, Rick Griffin's style of psychedelic art, some of the other guys were Stanley Mouse, Victor Muskoka, who else? R. Crumb would have been from that same era, even though he wasn't necessarily like a druggy psychedelic guy. But all of that stuff sort of existed in a little bit of an echo chamber for a lot of years, which I can relate to as a pipe maker. And so really by the 90s, the American fine art front-facing kind of movement had really degraded in importance and in impact. The major art magazines at the time, there are two of them I remember from art school, even when I was in the 90s, and one was Art Forum and the other was, what was it? Art Magazine or something. But like the magazine would be like pages of text of just wonks talking all this, art speak. And there'd be little thumbnail pictures of a piece of art that they'd be talking about some gallery show, and so this guy, Robert Williams, and another man, Greg Escalante. Robert Williams he called himself, I can't remember his exact name off the top of my head, but he had a name for his art, surrealism, some kind of very much in the lines of like Dali, but add a little more of a garish, like Southern California surf, hot rod, lowrider car aesthetic. And so Robert Williams was an artist, Greg Escalante was an art collector, and they together created the art magazine Juxtapose magazine. Have you ever heard of Juxtapose?
No.
Okay, Juxtapose magazine was probably the biggest selling art magazine in the world for about 20 years, starting in the 90s and on and through the 2000s. But they basically they were responsible for graffiti art and all of that outlaw culture art kind of becoming popular. And their magazines were full art. Every page was just images and it was beautiful. Anyhow, I became friends with Greg Escalante, one of the founders of that magazine, about 10 years ago, a little more than 10 years ago. He invited me to do a show at his gallery in Southern California. And he was seeing in my work and in others' pipe art, he was attracted to it for a similar reason as people would be attracted to that earlier phase of sort of like outlaw psychedelic art. And so still it hasn't really hit the mainstream, right? But I met a friend of mine, Brian Chambers, through Greg Escalante at that show. That's the only other show I've done until very recently. Brian Chambers is someone of my generation who is an art collector of all of that kind of art. Rick Griffin, all the Grateful Dead artists, the poster artists, all of the really the people that were responsible for. I mean, Rick did posters for the Doors, Jimi Hendrix, like all of these early era, psychedelic rock bands. Rick's art for those bands became like just like sort of holy grails for people who are in love with like that sort of underground psychedelic art. So that brings us to Brian Chambers, who has the Chambers Project is his project where he is specialized in showing that kind of art, those artists. Rick Griffin, you ever heard of, I'm sure you know Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, Hunter S. Thompson, Ralph Steadman is an artist that was responsible for all the wacky drawings. If you ever saw any art that was related to Hunter S. Thompson or that movie, it was all this artist, Ralph Steadman. So Steadman's still alive and making art, also very on the outside of the normal acceptable art world. So brings me to my little part where I jump on the shoulders of these giants. In the last 10 years, through Brian's efforts and others, but a lot of this has been Brian. He's sort of taken the mantle from his mentors, who would have been Greg and another guy, J.K. Burcaster. He now is currently probably responsible for stewarding and popularizing and bringing to the mainstream attention all of this Grateful Dead art, psychedelic art, 60s poster art, etc. So Brian's a huge Rick Griffin fan, and he commissioned me to make this piece for this show that happened last week. The piece I made is, they call it Wowza, because Rick Griffin also, before his, it's a surfing eyeball emerging out of like a circle of flames. And it originally comes from a comic book. Here, one second.
You sent me a photo of that. I'm wondering if I can download it.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe or maybe not. Yeah, I don't know if I can get it. Yeah.
But
Have you got it? Yeah, I can't grab it from Instagram. Maybe I can save image as.
But if anybody were to go to my Instagram page, they'll see this piece made out of glass right now.
Okay.
But this is a very iconic image of Rick Griffin's. He originally was an illustrator for Surfer magazine in the very early 60s. And then when he started using cannabis and other varied medicinal plants and psychedelic drugs and all that, spirit of the times, mid 60s, his art changed over and from kind of hokey, surfy to involving a little bit of the sort of counterculture and hippies, and then from there he went on to do the poster art and the work with the Dead and a lot of, things that came from there. But basically this showing showed many of his classics that came out of like collections that have, some of them been unseen in a public setting ever. And I was fortunate enough to be asked to create a piece of glass based off of this particular piece of his. And
can you show it again?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Now that the screen is bigger. There you go. Yeah. And I don't know. I guess you wouldn't be able to do it on your phone. Let me see if I could download the image myself, if this would work or not. If I got the right one, if that's the glass. And that other one is a video. Let's see if I could grab that as well. It'd be nice to be able to show people. And then because you have your beautiful work right there, do you want to show us something in your studio?
Sure. Yeah, so what was significant about this particular piece just now, that maybe you'll be able to show it, maybe not, but it's the first, like what we call these pieces head pieces, headies. Head pieces is like, that's a name for like a piece of glass pipe art that you really tried your hardest on. You went all the way in and it's the best you can do. And that comes from a word in the 90s, like around the Dead culture and marijuana culture, heady weed. Like the headiest weed was the very good weed, not to be confused with like the Mexican brick weed that, smashed and just whatever. So like a heady nugget would be like just a perfect flower from somebody's cannabis that is like growing it like, in a sacred way, or at least an intentional way. And so we get this term headies from that. And these are all head pieces. And back to that Griffin piece, that was the first headpiece I've ever made in 27 years that was not a pipe. So it's, on one hand, it is a distinction that I can say that it was shown in a fine art capacity. And I thank Brian and the Griffin family, who I'm friends with. Rick's kids are all very active in preserving his legacy, and we've gotten to have a friendship and a relationship. So it's an honor that I am able to create glass art based off of his work. Oh yeah, there we go. That's there's the model with an almost finished version of piece of glass. But
Right.
it's I'm kind of sliding in through the back door of the Griffin display, because, and then Griffin kind of slides in the back door of the psychedelic portion of the modern art world. But the thing is that in the modern art world, it's become so devoid of purpose, much like the culture that it reflects, that it's this early exploratory psychedelic art and glass pipes and things like that I think are interesting to people, because it's fresh, it's coming out of a genuine intention from real people who began making it for the love of it. Like, there wasn't exactly a whole lot of money to make out of drawing pictures like this once upon a time, and for most people still. And same with glass. Like, when we began, to make $100 in a day was a win. And so those of us who spent a few thousand hours on it, we've been lucky enough to make it this far and get a few $1,000s out of it.
Amazing. Yeah, good
Let
for
me.
you. Yeah, do you want
I'll
to
try and share a couple of these. Let me see if I can. I think we tried this last time, where I try and flip my camera, but I don't know if I was ever able to. Maybe I'll go like this, and I.
Uh-oh. We lost him. I think his connection maybe just died an ugly death, because he's totally out of the studio. But we are into it for 2 hours and 17 minutes. So he's back. All right. So let's see. Just stop the screen in case that's. There you go. Hello.
There we go. You got me?
No, I got you. Let's see how this works.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
this first one.
Yeah, we can sort of see it. It is a little pixelated, unfortunately, with the connection. But yeah, I think.
Shucks.
Yeah. We can sort of see it, like just the detail is.
Okay.
Is that the one with the bees? I think you showed us.
Yep. This is one of the ones with the bees.
Wow. Yeah.
Which is a collaboration with Joe Peters.
Right. Yes, and all of the honeycomb. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah. I think you did show us this one.
Yeah. Honeycomb. Yeah. So that's like a Gundam robot, a honey Gundam, the Japanese Gundam style, like a transformer, but with a honey vibe. The honey is my friend Joe's aesthetic, and the build is a little of both of us, but I'm a little more known for robots probably.
Nice.
And let's see. Here's this is another one that we saw last time, but I'll just briefly show. This is another one with Joe.
Yeah, that's
gosh,
beautiful.
I'm so sorry. The pixels are rough. I'm in the top of the Ozark Mountains, and my service just disappeared on me today.
Yeah. It's done really well. I'm glad we've made it 2 hours and almost 20 minutes. So
that's
it's
good.
Worked out for us. Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah,
is this really coming through even well enough to be worth showing?
I think so. Yeah, we can see the honeycomb detail in the back end of those at times.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Then,
very nice.
This one here is a really crazy one. This is a collaboration with a friend of mine, Mike Gong.
Ah, beautiful. Wow.
Can you see those faces?
Yes, I just tuned into the fact that they are faces.
And then the very front one, again, this is very heavily steeped in drug culture.
Right.
This is Mike's signature marble. They're called acid eater marbles.
Okay. And he's got a a tab in his mouth or something there.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
actually a synthetic opal. Oddly enough, synthetic opals have the same coefficient of expansion, which means it cools down and heats up at the same rate as this particular formula of glass. And so we're able to trap these synthetic opals inside of the glass hot, and then when it cools down, it doesn't crack.
No kidding.
So that's it.
Wow.
And then there's a bunch of them. Each one of these little flowers has its own little acid eater guy, and then these little tongues. These are like little tongues on the outside of it, and each one of those has a little acid square
Ah,
on it. This is
oh,
sort of like a psychedelic history lesson. And if you count all of the acid tabs on the whole piece, there are 25 of them, which LSD was the 25th compound that Albert Hofmann discovered when he was trying to synthesize a substance that could be used to ease labor pains in birthing mothers. And unexpectedly, he discovered LSD, as the story goes, and that led to a whole another podcast worth of talking.
yeah, exactly. I was just my brain was exploding on that one.
But this is, yeah, so this is like, we call this the acid eater, Debbie, after Mike's. This is also Mike's pattern right here. He calls it his silly string tech. Remember the colorful silly string uh,
Yes,
that
that's
sprayed out
my
of
childhood right
aerosol
there.
bottles when we were kids?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
So this is
yeah.
his silly string tech, where basically, as you can see, hopefully some little blips of, um, it looks like silly
Incredible,
string, bunch of
incredible
colors of silly string.
detail.
And
Wow.
Mike is somebody who even predates me. He's been in glass a little longer than me yet. He's a total legend and a good brother.
That's amazing that you guys collaborate too, because that's like real true organic culture is competitive and collaborative at the same time,
100%. And all of
right?
us, I think all of us have moments where our competitive nature it just became too much. And you know, when I think about the times that I've been most competitive, sometimes those haven't been my happiest times or my proudest times. But you know, when whatever it is we're trying to prove to ourselves, I mean, I don't know anybody that has achieved like high levels in art or glass or any form of creative expression that doesn't have some amount of trauma, you know, some sort of early sense of insecurity or not enoughness that we seek to alleviate by achieving a cool thing, you know. And so I'm no different. And as much as I have tried to use glass, you know, and the whole career as a way to create and share beauty, I have to recognize that there is a terrible side to it too, which is whatever sense of incompletion, you know, I may have inherited from growing up in this realm in my certain circumstances. And I do know now, after 27 years, a large amount of the successes have come from an inner trying to be good enough or trying to
Mhm,
achieve, you know.
mhm,
So
mhm.
it's not lost on me now. But this here I call the Watiko Devi. And again, like these are all Davies. That's sort of been my signature style until very recently when I've been doing some of these larger Rick Griffin pieces. But you know,
That's
this one here is it represents there's like consciousness, you know, behind the mask.
mm,
So the mask is coming off, and this one I must admit has a little bit of a darker aspect to it. This is sort of like the eye in the sky, the machine, you know, and it has a floral look to it, so it's beautiful when you approach it, but then you get in closer, and there's almost like a sinister aspect to it. These flower petals are almost like blades,
mhm.
and you might be transfixed by the eye, which is rainbow. It's technicolored. You know, this goes back to a dream I had when I was a child, a very disturbing dream, but that's for another day. But these, you know, so this is sort of like you get close to what seems like a beautiful meditating figure, and the mask comes off, and there's maybe this is like a panopticonal type of many-eyed It's very surveillance oriented.
Right, right. Wow, that's a cultural piece right in and of itself there.
This one really
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Looks like we'll have to do a third podcast, Banjo.
Yeah. Hey, if you'll have me in this podcast can handle my ramblings, it's very helpful for me as an artist. I've existed in a particular corner of the art world where you don't have to explain yourself. I don't need to, I dropped out of art school after 3.5 years.
Mm.
And I was not good uh, at the critiques. I didn't know what to say, hadn't lived enough life to have anything to say. I knew if I would have said anything, I would have been faking it, and none of that was lost on my counselors and my teachers. And so they actually recommended you should just keep traveling, because I would go travel in the summer and go to like dead affiliated shows and rainbow gatherings and just totally blast my mind out in the forest, with all these people doing a totally different thing than college. But then I come back to school in fall and try and plug in, and eventually they just sent me on my way. And during the last time I was out journeying is when I found glass, and all the art lessons and teachings all kind of came back to me and were useful to me. And I'm probably rare in that I'm one of the only people in that art program that has been making art for a living, raised a family on it for almost 30 years. So,
Right.
but
This
early
is
on,
hard,
I knew
right?
nothing. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, this is another big part of it, because the whole world of having to make a living and being a slave in a society and a slave in
Oh,
a job, like, that you can slave to purpose, right?
yes.
And have it be productive, and not even just for yourself, again, being part of this growing movement, inspiring people to make their living this way. I'm all for that, because
It's been a magical experience and continues to be. My kids all work. This is another, three of my six kids are professional glass artists
wow.
now.
Wow.
Um,
And they call
yeah,
you a king hero, by the way. I wanted to repeat that for
yeah.
the last time. That's how this happened, because you said to me,
Particularly my son. Yeah. We
yeah,
were watching your shows and then he just took to calling me King Hero.
so
And
great. King,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, I love that, because the kids know.
So
So
yeah, this piece here is this is a collaboration with a Japanese artist, Jumichi, and his art name is Rose Rhodes. He's a huge deadhead. It's hard to see the detail. Um,
yeah,
but
yeah,
you see inside that crystal, there's like really intense. Uh, it's almost like sacred geometry pattern.
yes,
Does that come through at all?
a little bit. It
You can
does.
see a
Yeah,
flower
yeah,
of life. I'm gonna have to
yeah.
figure out my service before our next talk, and we can show these pieces again when
Okay,
that time comes, if I still have them. But yeah, this
okay.
was another one that was made, like I said, in collaboration with a Japanese artist. So this was made all the way through the mail. He sent me sections that he had
Unreal.
made in Japan, and then I was able to take them and create this sculpture using his sections in uh, my Devi setup.
Right, right. Yeah, Mike is just giving you kudos. 6 kids and 3 artists that do that for a living. Amazing, big inspiration, sir.
I appreciate that, my friend. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a very beautiful experience to be able to create art with my kids. Like, and a couple, I mean, they're all artists, but three of them are in for it with the glass, and then another one actually, it's about to be a fourth, because really both my twin daughters who are 16 blow glass. But one of them is like going real hard right now, like made a page and is doing it. The other one's kind of in a planning stage. They both have many, many hours on the torch. But the thing for me, I think that is, if there's any parents listening, or soon to be parents or want to be parents or who knows what, my dad was a dairy farmer, and somehow, somehow what he did, and again, like my mom was a teacher at a public school, but somehow what they did didn't look interesting enough. I mean, the dairy farming may have been something that caught me, but I had already seen the world too much, and that would have just been crazy to do that for me. But like when I look at my dad would love nothing more than for me to stay on the farm and we milk cows together, and that's beautiful. That's but in my own experience, you know, I how to get your kids to do the cool stuff that you like and think is cool is you got to really love it and make it look fun and don't push them. Like I never pushed any of the kids to blow glass. They knew it was there if they wanted it. It's very unschooling, kind of attachment parenting rooted thing, but I made sure that I was, I was always enjoying it and that they always knew it's there for them if they want to mess around. And so somehow I guess I made it look gratifying enough where they weren't scared of it and they weren't like, oh, how would we ever reach the level dad reached or whatever. They don't even care. They're just, they see it as a normal thing to do. Like once upon a time, families play music on the porch. And then it's just natural that the kids, oh, well, where'd you get started in music? Oh, the family was always just playing music on the porch. It's what they did. So that's how it's been for us with music, but also with glass. And so, make it seem fun and don't push on them. And, they might just get into it.
Yeah, don't push on them. That's my claim to fame. I finally learned, that anything that I try to get my son to do, he earmarks that for don't do that.
Yes.
Whatever it
Oh,
is,
yes.
don't do that. So I did learn to completely back off, and there were times where I thought, oh, like, is he going to thrive? Is he going to succeed? Is he going to, be able to hunker down and do anything? And as long as I had nothing to do with it, he would zero in, like, incredible work ethic. The guy is working 80-hour work weeks right now and developing skills. I don't know that he's going to like to have those skills in the long run or whatever, but it's just the act of building skills. Same with the musician stuff. He just grew up around it. He was playing his dad's kit drum from as a 1-year-old. His dad would let him go in the studio and turn all the buttons and everything. And he became a very proficient musician very quickly. And as long as it's all his inspiration, then he can just rock it out.
That's everything. Like how to, like we were talking about guardrails earlier in terms of like the engineering class, and the CIA hippie movement, but like also is a good way, like keeping some guardrails up, to your kid will find a lane if it's a good lane. If you can, create a good lane and have it with energy that's flowing, like that's what we're born to do. That's the continuing concept right there. We have it in our ancestral coding to observe what's working out for the big people, our caregivers. And if it's working out well for them, usually that's the most, powerful determinant for what we're going to take to. And if it's going to work out for us, like one of the most important parenting things I think I ever heard was that your kids don't become what they are by what you say to them. It's by how you are.
Yes.
And so there goes with that.
Yeah. Gabor Mate said to me personally, there's nothing so attractive as a happy parent. And that's when I went full time to work on that element.
Oh, and, so important.
It was everything. Yeah. Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Is there one last piece you wanted to show us before we close out?
If the image is good.
Yeah, it is pretty good.
Okay. Yeah. So this would be what, this is the only piece that I've shown that you can tell it's a pipe. Most people would be able to tell it's a pipe.
Yeah, you could definitely. Yeah. Are they super fragile, by the way? Don't you get scared handling them that you're going to drop it?
These here, like a pint glass.
Yeah.
This is about as thick as a pint glass. So, just the same way that you could just,
Yeah.
You'd have to hit that pint glass on a rock or something to break it. This is the same way. These little fingers, I will say, like, these little fingers on these pieces.
Yeah.
That's about 2.5 to 3 millimeters thick.
Okay.
So maybe about the size of a cooked piece of spaghetti.
Okay.
And so those, those are a little more fragile. And if they were to ding into something, the chances are higher that something might go. But something like this is just really pretty solid. Some people intentionally make things even thinner than humanly possible because it's just sort of a little goal and a fun thing to brag about. But I make mine mine are what I call medium thickness, but a lot of people would maybe consider this to be heavy wall weight.
Right.
But well, is that coming through clear at all?
It is. Yeah. Ish. It's got to be functional. This is another kind of parameter or guardrail of your of your work, that
Yes.
it's being used probably every day or often. It's like it's not for just being, put aside and
Yes.
look at it, right? That
That's
it has.
another one of the pitches. Yeah. That's one of the things about the art and the community that I think are integral to its attraction and vibrancy as an art movement, because you don't just hang it on the wall, you're like using it and having it, again, like I recognize that, smoking a pound of weed a month, or an ounce of hash every 2-3 days might be pushing it in terms of medicinal, but it's definitely still ritualistic. And there's a positive ritualistic aspect to sharing, some herbs or some essential oils with your friends through beautiful, intentionally crafted objects, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah, because the consciousness that went into them is included, right? Like that's
Yes. Oh, yes.
again why the AI isn't it wouldn't satisfy to the same degree.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what we like to think. So good luck, AI.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
just going to be copying stuff we've already done. So
Right.
AI's, it's just like that old rascal Satan, it's just all a big, it's all a big prideful attempt at usurpation, but it's going to fall flat, I mean, even normies think that AI art is dumb now. That's promising.
Right. Yeah. Oh, exactly. And YouTube won't allow AI music, which is
Right.
so, yeah, yeah. I mean, they recognize it
Amazing.
doesn't get the views. So they
Right.
know, right? Yeah. The eyeballs are not going there. So it's perfect.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's good
Well,
news, I think.
it is
Maybe,
very
maybe
good
not.
news.
Maybe
Well,
that's YouTube figuring out they got to readjust their thing and, oh yeah, we made that illegal. Kind of like they made subliminal programming illegal in 1962 or something. You're like, what? They're able to do that back then and it's been illegal? Like, okay, so who knows?
who knows?
It's
Yeah.
always unfolding.
Yeah, yeah, but you're a beautiful example of the organic growth of culture. That's what I wanted to demonstrate today. It's been a wonderful anthropology lesson. Thank you very much for sharing your view. That to me, there's nothing more exciting than seeing through people's eyes. I don't have the time or bandwidth to have everybody's experience, but I can have these kind of conversations that I feel in and of itself is part of the organic growth of culture. So thank you so much, Matt, for being here.
Oh, it's all my pleasure, and thank you so much for the invitation again, and all of the thought-provoking. I love these convos, this one and the last one we had, because it really, you are a very curious investigator, and that curiosity is very inspiring. And, like I said, like in my corner of art world, we haven't needed to learn how to talk about what it is we do and why, because it was such a craft oriented discipline from the start. Like I said, I dropped out of college because I couldn't handle the have to talk smart about my creation thing. I didn't know what to think. And then when I found pipes, it was like, oh wow, like you can put your energy into making something beautiful and someone else will use it and appreciate it. And it didn't take an explanation. It didn't take like an fancy art speak. It just was appreciated for the energy that was put into it and for the outcome. And so after all these years, the inevitable place I'm called to continue trying to bring my art is the fine art world. And I do, it is exciting for me to try and reach into other areas, more mainstream places, to share what it is both that I'm stand for and encode into my art, as well as what I think is important and beautiful and useful for the community that I see as being intrinsic to the glass community at large. And so all that to say, opportunities like this really give me a great it's great practice, and it's great I learned so much. I had a teacher once that said, we teach what we most need to learn. And so when I apply everything that I've been saying in this conversation. Much of it is generally what I think, on a regular day. And let's say it's a teaching. I'm teaching these things that seem important to me, or I'm talking about these things, and what in that, where in that are the places where I can learn and grow. And so examining my art, why I do it, where it came from, and all the other host of anthropological concepts that we have found that we enjoy sharing and exploring together, it up levels my ability to show up in those mainstream art places where most of the people have been trained specifically how to say and what to say and how to, I don't go for that, but I know that if I can be eloquent and aware enough of what does motivate me and what does go into the work I do and what is real about the community that has held me and that I've helped to contribute to, and this whole time, all of that I think is important and worthy of sharing and bringing to those more mainstream pockets, so to speak. So I thank you again for the opportunity. I learned so much about myself and what I do, even though I think that I've got it all figured out. It's just like I learn much from what comes out of me sometimes, and I put things together because of the exchange. That very enlightening and helpful and inspiring for me.
Fantastic. That's so beautiful. Yeah, well, I can't wait for part 3 now, and we'll really get into that, the depths of the meaning. I know exactly what you're talking about, because the articulation of the meaning is something that, it's you have to know yourself.
Yeah.
Right. That's what it digs out of you. Like,
Oh
okay, well,
man.
why do what I do? And,
I
yeah.
love it. I love it.
Yeah.
And it's getting, especially when you've done it a few times and you get to start realizing what to expect. I know that I can expect some exciting, fun, different little new ways to look at things, that's going to come out of each of us in this unique convergence of streams. So,
Indeed.
yeah. Thanks again,
Yeah,
Beth.
very, very synergistic. You're very welcome. Thanks everyone for joining us. Please help share this out. It's hard for me even to describe how epic these interviews have been for me, and super fun. And so if you were inspired, definitely pass this on. See you guys again Friday, Beth of Fresh Air. I will be interviewed this time by Marissa Love, who's going to come on, and she gave a beautiful interview last time, and now she's going to be asking me the questions. So that's pretty fun for me, actually. I think she'll be good at that. Yeah, right on. Okay, well, I'm going to play us out, and I hope you guys have a beautiful rest of your day. We'll be in contact again, Mr. Banjo Matte Glass.
Yes, ma'am. Take care,
All right.
Beth.
Okay, thank you. Bye for now.